Hey, good afternoon, everybody. 6 minutes past the hour of 3 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. I am Brian Wilson, and I'm your friend and radio buddy. I'm your Farb. And this is the drive for the 30th day of October, 1 day short of Halloween. Have you gotten your Halloween candy yet? See, now, if you've waited this long, you're not going to get the great candy. That's all there is to it. I think I ended up getting candy that is heavily weighted with malted milk balls, the so-called Whoppers, and it's a huge mistake. I waited too long, but
well, at least you won't eat it.
Well, yeah, I don't like them, yeah. But I like everything else in the sack. And the problem is, by the time the trick-or-treaters arrive, the only thing that will be left will be the Whoppers, and I feel bad about that because I've been eating the
beggars can't be choosers,
chocolate,
man.
I've been eating the chocolate, and I've been eating the Reese's peanut butter cups.
You know, that's kind of the goal that I take whenever I do Halloween candy and trick-or-treating. I pick out the stuff I want to keep and then give the trick-or-treaters all the crap that I don't want.
They don't really need it anyway.
Hey, they'll get the good stuff down the street.
We're doing them a favor by giving them stuff that they won't eat. And therefore, they're not going to get obese very young in their lives, and they'll thank us for it later.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's get started on the day's events. If you have been watching the news, you know that things are beginning to heat up in Israel. The ground assault, I guess you would have to say, is on in a bigger way. It's real funny how they don't want to describe it as a full-on ground assault, but they're inside Gaza now, and they're controlling space, so I think you have to call it a ground assault. And the United States has been counseling, when I say United States, I mean the Biden administration, has been counseling the Israelis to be careful here, to go slow, and there's even been talk about, well, have you asked them, are we asking them for a ceasefire? I mean, our folks say no, and today it was made clear by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, that it doesn't matter because we're not going to have a ceasefire of any kind.
I want to make clear Israel's position regarding a ceasefire. Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th.
Well, and can you blame them? Now, the real question is, what is their top priority? It is decimating Hamas, but also with a mind to the terrorists who are holding hostages and trying to get the hostages back.
Humanitarians, they're the opposite of that, and we have to understand the people that we are dealing with. And the people who are our people who are being held hostage, they're in terrible danger. We'll make a maximum effort to get them out. We have to do our best, but it's a formidable circumstance. The idea of trying to get them out is at the top of our agenda. We believe that the military operation and keeping the pressure up on Hamas is a way to facilitate their release. We think that diplomatic pressure on Hamas's friends, their allies in the Middle East, that's another way of getting them out. And that combination is going to get us more people out in the end. Well, I think we all have to understand that anyone who wants to see peace in the Middle East has to see that Hamas is a major problem. They're going to oppose any peace. They're going to oppose any reconciliation. I mean, they say openly, yes, that the Jewish state, my country, has no right to exist, not in any borders. They say openly that any Arab leader who negotiates with Israel is a traitor to Islam and a traitor to the Arab world. And finally, they say every Jew, every Israeli is a legitimate target for murder, for their terrorism. These people oppose peace and reconciliation, and anyone who wants to see a better and more peaceful Middle East has to support Israel in our fight against Hamas.
That's Ambassador Mark Regev speaking on Fox News earlier today. And then what about how do we look at it? How do we look at what is happening, the ground action there inside Gaza? Here is Admiral John Kirby from the White House just a few moments ago.
I'll let the Israelis characterize their ground operations. We're not going to slap bumper stickers on it here from the podium. They can speak to, and they did. They had a press briefing today. Defense Minister Gallant talked about what they're doing. And by all accounts, it appears that what they're trying to do is really put a lot more pressure on Hamas leaders. And when you're trying to go after the leadership of an organization, as we well know from our own experience against ISIS and against Al-Qaeda, putting that pressure, you have to be able to apply a discrete amount of force, and that's easier to apply with soldiers than it is to apply just from the air. So that's what they have described what they're doing, and I think I'll leave it to them. Now, as for your question, can you defeat them, I think is how you put it. Again, you got to be careful with analogies, but what we have, I think, demonstrated to a fairly well is that you can decapitate a terrorist organization, you can decimate their capabilities, you can render them a lot less effective. You're probably never going to get rid of the ideology that backs them up and allows them to recruit into resource. But look at ISIS right now. It's a shadow of itself. Remember, they were storming across Iraq and Syria with this big caliphate that they wanted to govern. It's a shadow of its former self. Still a viable threat, which is why we have some troops on the ground, but it's nowhere near the threat that it once was. And Al-Qaeda, the same thing. You can say the most recent intelligence community report an analysis that they have been rendered completely ineffective in places like Afghanistan. Doesn't mean that there aren't offshoots. Doesn't mean that they don't try to morph and change into something else. But we think that you can, in fact, have a tremendous impact on a terrorist organization's leadership, their resourcing, their capabilities, their ability to recruit, their ability to operate. Doesn't mean it all goes away, but you can.
Well, where are they right now? Well, they have entered Gaza from the north through near the Ares Gate. The earlier incursions simply were just early forays into Gaza to sort of, clear the way for the larger tanks and the ground forces to move in, to give a clear path, a secure path for that to happen. And now they are taking up space in the northwest and the northeast corners of Gaza. And that's where they are now. Again, I just think we need to understand that this is going to be a very long ordeal. It's not going to be over in a day. It's not going to be over in a week. It's not going to be over maybe even in months. So this is going to be a slow, methodical, systematic, complete annihilation of Hamas, and not easy given that so much of Hamas is underground. From The Guardian, Israel's heaviest bombardment of Gaza of the war so far was aimed at Hamas's extensive network of underground tunnels and bunkers, known to Israelis military planners as the Metro, named after the subway system in D.C., I guess. A spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Force said the strikes involving about 100 planes began after dusk and hit 150 underground targets associated with Hamas's tunnel network, a system that has been years in the making. The tunnels have long been viewed as a major security challenge, used in the past for smuggling and incursions into Israel, as well as a serious obstacle for Israeli forces attempting to operate in Gaza. A recent insight into the scale of the tunnel system, which the IDF alleged extends even under Gaza City's main Dar al-Shifa hospital, was provided by an 85-year-old woman who's been taken hostage by the Islamic group during the October 7th raid. After she was released, she recounted being taken by her captors into the system of tunnels that she likened to a spider's web. So she said she was taken across the Gaza border on a motorbike. It was held briefly, and then went underground and walked for kilometers in wet tunnels for 2 or 3 hours in what she described as a spider web of tunnels. One of the things that we have a great interest in is making sure that our troops in the region are protected from attacks. And even so, it seems we have a lot of resources in the region. We have aircraft carrier strike groups. We have missile ships that are designed to intercept missiles. We've got all kinds of military in the region in places like Syria and Saudi Arabia and Iraq. And the question is, how do we protect them? Because they are under some danger. And then, according to this story in the Washington Examiner, the Iranian proxies in the region continue to carry out attacks against U.S. troops in the Middle East. I've seen one story that says that U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria have been attacked 23 times in the last 2 weeks. And so they have been moving in a bunch of equipment to try to provide some security for them, sort of their own little Iron Dome, which I don't understand why in the world that hasn't happened before now. If you have troops in the region and they were always susceptible to an attack, why not have the resources to protect them? I mean, they don't do any good in a warehouse in the United States. Let's get them over there. Let's get them up and running and put them in a place where they can actually do some good. 21 U.S. service members have been injured. We are told none of the injuries are severe. One U.S. contractor has died, but that was from a cardiac arrest. And President Biden has urged Iran not to escalate or involve itself with Israel's war with Hamas. But he keeps saying, well, you know, there will be consequences. There will be consequences. And other than sending 2 F-16s, to take out a few terrorist supplies of weapons inside of, I think it's Syria, nothing much has happened. Nothing much has happened. So they continue to go into Gaza in a big way. Still a problem is the 600 or so United States citizens who were inside Gaza and who are trying to get out in the southern part of Gaza near something called the Rafah Gate. And again, the problem is nobody will come over and open up the gate. It's funny, you know, the Egyptians will open their side of the gate, but then there's a little dead man's line. And for some reason, I don't know why, they can't get the people in Gaza to open the gate and let people out. I think we're going to have to send people in there with some bolt cutters and make sure that gate comes down one way or the other. The Egyptians are now said to be ready to process Americans. If they come, show their passport, they will be allowed into Egypt so they can find passages back home. However, they can't get through the first gate, which is on the Gaza side, and I don't know how that's going to be resolved except with a pair of very brave people with bolt cutters. But one way or the other, that continues to be a problem, as is the problem of the American hostages that are being held inside Gaza. By best estimate, we think there may be 10 Americans. Many of them could be dual passport holders, but still American citizens who are inside Gaza. And we have no idea exactly who they are. We don't have any real good ideas how many of them there really are. And we have no idea where they are, which is the most important factor there. So the Israelis stepping up, moving slowly. It will be a long and protracted assault. And at the end of the day, it seems to me, they will be very effective in making sure that there's not much left to Hamas, but it's not going to be easy, especially when you have to deal with all those tunnels. It is now 20 minutes past the hour of 3 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Let me tell you about the folks over at DT McCall's Good Company. Been around for more than 100 years here in Middle Tennessee, and they have a reputation for treating people right. And I mean, I think that's why they've been around for 100 years. I mean, if you have a reputation for not treating people right, you don't make it that long. So if you need furniture, if you need appliances, if you need something for your house, maybe you need a bedroom suite, maybe you need a couch, I don't know, whatever it is you need, I'm telling you, you would do well to spend some time going to one of the local DT McCall stores in the area. I have done that. Cabana wife and I have gone over there, and we've bought a lot of our stuff from DT McCall's, and we've always had great experiences. One of the things that they'll do is they're going to give you an honest price. They don't play a game where they lowball the price and then add a bunch of things onto it so that you end up finding out that price that you thought was a great price was not such a good price after all. At DT McCall's, they give you a good price, but it's an honest price that includes the setup, the delivery, the haul away, the whole 9 yards. You're not going to be playing games like they do at the big box stores. Whenever possible, DT McCall sells products made and manufactured right here in Middle Tennessee. A lot to love about this company. If you are interested in finding out something that you need for your house, go to DT McCall's, and you can find their 5 convenient locations and by going to their website, dtmccalls.com.
Student loan payments are back, but not without a few bumps in the road since the restart this month. Former President Trump back under a gag order and chaos erupting in Washington, D.C. over January 6th arrests. That and more, 3:30 Super Talk, 99.7 WTN.
It is 24 minutes past the hour of 3 o'clock on Super Talk. Mac Morey in the newsroom, Chris Weber in the control room, and I am your friend and radio buddy, Brian Wilson, and this is The Drive on the day before Halloween. Chris, I assume that tomorrow you will have all of the appropriate Halloween music.
Absolutely. You can count on it.
I mean, I know I can count on you. I don't even have to really ask that question because you're such an ace producer.
Actually, if you hadn't said anything, I probably wouldn't have given it a second thought.
Well, okay. Then.
Maybe I would have. I don't know.
I think you would have. I think you would have. And looking forward to having all the little trick-or-treaters come by and look at the gaze under the watchful eye, the blinky eyes of our 12-foot skeleton.
Yeah, you can pretty much rule out any shenanigans happening at your house because
that's right.
What
they don't know is that the camera is rigged inside the skeleton, so I can see what those little buggers are doing as they come up the street and looking. If anybody tries to mess with the skeleton, we're going to get a great picture of you. So just letting you know. And so there you have that. I guess we'll move into something we like to call the 2024 update. Because, it's never too soon to be talking about an election that's more than a year away. First of all, there is a poll, and I just won. I won't waste a lot of time on this because I think you know where it's going. And it has to do with, who's going to get the Republican nomination in the very first caucus. It's the Iowa caucuses. And it looks like it's going to be Trump by a mile. Right now, according to the NBC Des Moines Register poll, which has a pretty good record of getting it right in Iowa, Trump 43. But it's interesting that we now have a battle for second place in Iowa. DeSantis 16 and Haley 16. Tim Scott coming in third with 7. Ramaswamy, whose numbers have gone up but are fading a little bit, I think, 4. Pence no longer in the race, but he came in with 2. And then, the rest of them are, all single digits. So Trump is by and far the person. It is interesting to see that DeSantis and Haley now are battling it out for second place. Again, I don't know how you climb up over 27 points to, become competitive with Donald Trump. It's like it's Donald Trump, and then there's, a bunch of people who have aspirations to be president. So let's see how that all plays out. But right now, again, nothing that has changed, and it looks like Trump will prevail. If the election were held today, would prevail very well in the Republican nomination out of the caucuses in Iowa. According to multiple reports, the centrist No Labels Party is now attempting to gain access to ballots here in Tennessee for the upcoming 2024 election. Veteran political operator Ryan Clancy is the chief strategist of the group and boasts support from high-profile figures like, I don't know if I would call them all that high. Former Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, former Democrat mayor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, former Democrat Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut. There's a whole lot of formers in there, not a lot of currenters. Founded in 2010, the party describes itself as radically centrist and working on a unity ticket. Who would that be? Well, a lot of people think it might be Joe Manchin, but Joe Manchin has not made a determination, and nor have they really. And so, will they have a factor? I don't think so much in Tennessee. The question is, will they have a factor nationwide? And that, I think, is something that remains to be seen. I mean, really, you got RFK who's out there as an independent, and you've got Cornel West. He's running as an independent, although a very liberal independent. So, how does that help or hurt the two mainline candidates, Trump and Biden? It seems to me, depending on which poll you look at, sometimes you see one pulls a little bit more from Biden than it does from Trump. Then you see one that'll show is pulling a little bit more from Trump than Biden. And then you see an awful lot of them that seem to suggest that they're pulling from both. But if you get 3 or 4 of these independent candidates, then you may well have something that quite frankly would be a factor in the national election. So again, according to the Tennessee Secretary of State, to become recognized as a party, No Labels must file a petition signed by registered voters totaling 2.5% of the total number of voters who voted in the last gubernatorial election here in Tennessee. So that would have been, since there was about 1.7 million votes cast for governor, you would need somewhere in the neighborhood of 44,000 or 43,500 registered voters in the state of Tennessee, and that would be a lot. That'd be a heavy lift to get a lot of those people signed up. So anyway, will that happen? I don't know, but thanks to the Tennessee Star for doing the math for me, because I don't have to. Court arguments begin right now on blocking Trump from the presidential ballot because of the insurrection clause. Now, in some places, there have already been rulings about this, and they found it to be without merit. But there are 2 places in the country where you might have a situation where this might take hold, Efforts to use the Constitution's insurrection clause to bar Trump from running in the White House entered a new phase today in a hearing focused on whether the January 6th Capitol attacks meet the constitutional definition of the word insurrection and whether Trump's role meets the threshold of being barred. Colorado is the first of two states where lawsuits could end up reaching the U.S. Supreme Court. Monday's testimony began with details about the 2021 assault on the Capitol. Eric Olson represents a group of Colorado voters seeking to keep Trump off the ballot there. And so there is that one. The other one is scheduled on Thursday before the Minnesota Supreme Court. They're going to try to kick Trump off the ballot in that state. We've had hearings with presidential candidates debating their eligibility before, said Derek T. Muller, a Notre Dame law professor, listing candidates challenged on whether or not they meet the constitutional requirement of being a natural-born citizen. But all these cases are different from using an obscure clause of the Constitution with the incendiary bar against insurrection. Even if they are long shot, they have a plausible legal path, and certainly I think will go to the Supreme Court and maybe in an expedited fashion. It is now 32 minutes past the hour of 3 o'clock.
.332, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories right now. 44 degrees, gloomy, cold, and rainy today in Nashville. A freeze warning going into effect starting overnight at 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. Traffic and a weather forecast coming up in 5 minutes. Just 1 month since borrowers once again began repaying their student loan debts, but it hasn't been going smoothly. Andy Field with the latest from Washington.
The U.S. Education Department reports more than 800,000 Americans missed their first student loan payment since the government ended the 3-year pandemic pause. One of the largest payment processors, Mohila, gave borrowers just 7 days' notice, not the required 21 days, the government punishing the company by docking it more than $7 million. There are other federal student loan repayment glitches, including incorrect bills or double charging for debt that was already paid.
And former President Trump back under a gag order in the January 6th Capitol riot case. The judge had paused the gag order while Trump appeals, but she reinstated it after concluding Trump threatened his ex-chief of staff, Mark Meadows, by suggesting on social media Meadows was a, quote, weakling and a coward after Meadows testified before the grand jury in exchange for a form of immunity. And chaos staying in the nation's capital erupted in Washington, D.C. over this January 6th case. A courthouse today after authorities say January 6th defendant resisted arrest. Liz Landers has more on what happened.
Authorities say a January 6th defendant resisted arrest Monday during a scene that played out in a D.C. federal courthouse. Vitaly Gostinkowski was found guilty earlier this year of assaulting officers during the January 6th attack on the Capitol and was initially released from custody as he awaited sentencing. But after allegedly sending menacing anti-Semitic text messages to law enforcement who testified during his trial, the judge in the case scheduled a hearing for Monday. That's when things escalated. Multiple FBI and U.S. Marshal agents were required to detain the defendant and ensure the safety of the courtroom.
And that is the latest news. Weather and traffic next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Hey everybody, Dan Mattis with Nashville's Morning News on WTN. I'm here at the Nashville Rescue Mission doing the interviews that I look forward to doing every single year. These are incredible stories of people who have had amazing recoveries. Thanks to this amazing facility, they are able to get clean and lead a more productive life. The date of our annual radiothon is going to be Monday, November 20th. Listen in and please donate. You can get more information at 99.7 WTN, including a link to the website for Nashville's Rescue Mission.
You know, folks, I want to talk to you about gold. It's been used as money for millennia. It's a tried and true store of value and is consistent across generation. You know, some people have observed that generational wealth has three components: land, art, and precious metals. Land and art, well, you have to, buying land can be very expensive and interest rates are high. Art, well, you and I aren't real art experts, are we? But precious metals like gold, platinum, and silver are practical solutions. Inflation is currently decreasing the value of your money. And, so you find out, about precious metals by going to Nashville's real money source, Nashville Gold and Coin. Do you have gold that was given to you and you're not sure what the worth is, or you're just curious about learning more about precious metals? Well, this is your place. Gold and silver can be a safe haven during uncertain economic times, and you can learn all about the importance of owning precious metals by going to Nashville Gold and Coin. Always available to discuss your options or to educate you on the precious metals market. Do what I did. Go to Nashville's real money source, Nashville Gold and Coin. That's NashvilleGoldandCoin.com. "39 minutes past the hour on the drive. Let's head down to the swamp. Of course, a lot of things that are happening in the swamp are focused on the House of Representatives, which has been out and ineffectively not able to function for about 3 weeks because they didn't have a Speaker of the House. But now we got a Speaker of the House, and he's got his hands full trying to get things done before we run out of temporary spending money on the 17th of November. And he's moving a lot of things very quickly. House Speaker Mike Johnson pledged that the House will move on a standalone funding bill for aid to Israel this week, calling it urgent and a pressing need. Johnson's intent to pass funding for Israel in the lower chamber does not include funding aid for Ukraine, something that President Joe Biden wanted to lump together. He wanted to lump together Ukraine and Israel, and that's not going to happen in the House of Representatives. While Republicans are united in their support for Israel, aid for Ukraine is more controversial. possibly jeopardizing both if they were voted on together. So he's going to get you the sure thing, which is aid for Israel. A lot of things have to happen very quickly with the aid bills and for the appropriations bills. They will reconvene on Wednesday. You know, maybe if you really wanted to get some things done, maybe you could get them in a little earlier. I mean, they come in on Wednesday and generally they leave on Thursday. I don't know that they'll be leaving this week because they got really just too much to do. But, they're coming in on Wednesday night. And a lot of things. The must-pass spending bills on Wednesday night expected to begin votes on 3 of the must-pass appropriations bill for the legislative branch, the Department of Interior, and for Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development and related agency. And if they do that, they will have advanced 8 out of 12 appropriations bills, and that's a good thing. And then they will move on in the week of November 13th to Commerce, Justice, Science, related agency bills the first week of November, and then Labor, Health, and Human Services on the 13th. The Speaker is urging the House to work toward a plan to pass a stopgap continuing resolution that would keep things going until January 15th or maybe April 15th of 2024. I hope they don't do that. But I don't know how they're going to get it done because, quite frankly, even if the House gets all of the bills, they got to go over to the Senate, and the Senate's not going to take the House measures at face value. There'll have to be a conference. Could take a long, long time. So I don't know. I like January 15th better than I like April 15th. I'll tell you that for sure. You give them too much time, and then just, you give them a deadline, and you say it's got to be done by this time. And it's amazing how many times things can get done. Now, are they always done in a thoughtful way? No. But one way or the other, they need to get done. Censure resolutions are pending against Rashida Tlaib, and that was brought by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Democrats not wanting to stand around too long and let that go unanswered, have now put a censure resolution against Marjorie Taylor Greene. And because they are privileged resolutions, they will have to come to the floor, and they're going to have to come to the floor pretty quick, maybe Thursday. Then there's the question of George Santos, a scandal-ridden New York freshman, face a consequential vote this week as a handful of his fellow Republicans seek to expel him from Congress altogether. This was brought by Representative Anthony D'Esposito of New York, and it looks like he might be on the way out. Requires a 2/3 majority to pass the House of Representatives in order for it to happen. It means 78 Republicans would need to vote in favor if all the lawmakers were present and voting. So those things are happening. What about a subpoena for Hunter Biden? A lot of Republicans are saying we need a subpoena on Hunter Biden. And I say, well, don't call him in until you're ready. Have all your ducks in a row. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, the new speaker, had this to say about that.
Are you expecting to subpoena Hunter Biden?
I'm looking at that. I think that desperate times call for desperate measures, and that perhaps is overdue. We've not made a full decision yet. I'm counseling with the attorneys involved on all of this to see what the contours of. I'm an attorney myself, so I speak the language. We're trying to move forward on some of this very aggressively. I think the American people are owed these answers, and I think our suspicions about all this, the evidence that we've gathered so far, as you know, is affirming what many of us feared may be the worst. And, as Jamie Comer likes to say, bank records don't lie. We already have a lot of this evidence. The dots are being connected, and we'll see where it leads. He's already on record as saying that it's beginning to look a lot like maybe Joe Biden was involved in bribery. In other words, he accepted bribes in exchange for professional duties, which, of course, is a impeachable offense. So we'll be interested to see how long that goes on. Look, I want nothing more than an impeachment of Joe Biden. I want nothing more. However, the House can do whatever it wants to do. The Senate is never going to convict as long as it's controlled by Democrats. But I think, if you get in there with a very strong case, here is where, there was a this for that.
He was given this money and then immediately turned around and did this and pursued policy objectives on behalf of the people who were paying his son a lot of money. And we now have evidence of some of this money going directly into Joe Biden's bank account. So it's getting close. I would rather have that entire case sewed up before we bring in Hunter Biden. But, there is a push, and likely we will see a subpoena from Hunter Biden. I mean, what's the purpose? He comes in and he's going to plead the fifth. He's not going to say much. So I don't know what the big hurry is, but apparently there are some in the Republican caucus and conference in the House who definitely want that to happen. In other swamp news, this is pretty amazing. Where are all the government employees? Because they're not in federal offices in downtown Washington. The Agriculture Department is headquartered at the gateway between Washington and Virginia, just as you come across the river. But on any given day, about 90% of it is empty. The Government Accountability Office surveyed 24 federal agencies and found they averaged roughly 80% vacancy rate during the study period earlier this year. Investigators say the excess space has been a long-standing challenge, but the coronavirus pandemic and growing demands by employees to be allowed to telework raised the problem to a crisis level, with the government paying for massive square footage it just doesn't need anymore. During the pandemic, federal agencies operated under a maximum telework posture, with many employees working away from the office. And as the country emerges from the pandemic and agencies continue to offer telework as an option, the federal government has a unique opportunity to reconsider how much and what kind of office space it needs. But getting agencies to rethink their space is apparently a tough sell. Well, once you have it, you don't want to give it up. But if you're not using it, hey, how about we condense? Okay, you got the agriculture. I've been to the Agriculture Department. It is, by the way, one of the biggest buildings in the Washington area outside of the Pentagon. It's huge. It's massive. Goes for blocks and blocks. And if all you really have there is office space, and a great number of the people who work for the federal government, all they really need is office space, why not move some of them into the empty office space over at the Agriculture Department and get rid of some of these smaller buildings in town? Sell them off. Put the money in the Treasury. I know. They won't do it, but they should. We don't need to be heating and cooling and providing electricity to all of these empty offices, and apparently the vacancy rate is quite high. You may have heard the Biden administration say that they're going to increase the number of audits, but if you make under $400,000, you don't have anything to worry about. IRS Commissioner Danny Werfel faced a grilling by lawmakers last week, and he hinted that there's a chance the agency will be, contrary to its repeated pledges, increasing tax audits of Americans earning under $400,000. Of course they are. The question of whether the IRS will use some of the $80 billion or so funding boost to increase tax enforcement of people making less than $400,000 has been a contentious issue. IRS and Treasury Department officials have pledged not to increase those audits, and Janet Yellen has directed the IRS not to raise audit rates for those under $400,000. But a watchdog recently cast doubt on the promise, warning that Americans making less than $400,000 could inadvertently get caught in an enforcement dragnet because the IRS doesn't have a clear definition of high income, and its enforcers use an outdated $200,000 as a measure of people who make a lot of money. Meanwhile, the latest data on the tax gap show that it has jumped from $601 billion to $688 billion, putting pressure on the IRS to ramp up enforcement. So John Koskinen, the previous IRS director, testified that it would not be advisable to audit your way out of the tax gap, yet that seems to be exactly what the IRS is doing. And the indication from now Mr. Danny Werfel, who I'm sure is a fine, upstanding American. I mean, I'm sure that he's a great American in every way that you can possibly imagine, but there's some people suggesting that he might come after people making less than $400,000. And of course, you knew that was going to happen. Finally, Biden has issued a sweeping executive order, as he often does, on artificial intelligence. ordering several new actions which focus on areas like safety, privacy, protecting workers, and protecting innovation. And it would require companies developing models that pose serious risk to national security be in constant contact with the federal government when they are training the model and share the results of all safety tests. Yes, please. 51 past the hour.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. When we get to retirement, what do we want to do? We want to go and kick back, right? But we also want to take an income from our investment portfolios. And there are a lot of common myths that I hear about how do you take an income from an investment portfolio. One is that people will get into, this was really big a few years ago, really big, real estate investment trust. Now, real estate gets rented and it kicks off an income, and then you have some kind of dividend that's paid, and because the REIT has to pay out most of the dividend, it's a great way to take income in retirement. But what happens, like what happened recently, when all of a sudden the properties go unrented? What happens to your income? Bye-bye, it's gone. Another thing that I see is this: people buy stocks or stock mutual funds that are dividend paying, and what we'll do is we'll live off the dividends. Well, what is the dividend? It's part of the earnings of the company. So you got the earnings of the company, right? And then what happens is the company may pay out some of the dividend, and they call that a dividend when they pay it out, or they may retain some of it, and it's called retained earnings. Well, the problem is this: what if the company's earnings go down? Just like the real estate investment trust up here, what if the earnings go down? What happens to your dividend? It goes away. All of a sudden, it's bye-bye to your retirement income. So what do we want to do? We want to diversify way better. If you look at the academic research on investing and how to take income from a portfolio, quite often what it is saying, okay, I'm going to have some money in various asset classes. Large companies, small companies, value companies, growth companies, international companies, short-term bonds and intermediate bonds, and so on and so forth. And what I do is I look at these different areas of the market, and they have a historic return. And what happens if the portfolio does, this area of the market does better than this one? Well, in that particular year, I'm going to take income from this part of the portfolio. Then the next year, maybe this area does better than everything else. I'll take income from there. So what I'm doing is diversifying, which is an age-old concept. I mean, good grief, Nobel Prize winning concept of investing. And I actually apply it to taking income from a portfolio. So why is it that we often see this kind of stuff? It's because of the fees and the commissions and all of the incentives to sell you things that maybe aren't in your best interest. And a lot of advisors, you look at it, they aren't held to a fiduciary standard. In other words, they don't have to keep your best interest first. Paul Winkler, Inc., we hold ourselves voluntarily to that standard, and we actually disclose it in our disclosure brochures. So if you want to know more about what we do and learn more and educate along the way, go to paulwinkler.com. Set up a free 15-minute phone call so that you can learn more, become an educated investor. First step is easy. paulwinkler.com, free 15-minute phone call, and get started ASAP, because you can't afford to wait. You've got to make sure you get this right. You don't get a second shot.
More aid could be on the way to Israel. President Biden speaks on artificial intelligence and how to monitor its rapid progression. A lawsuit filed against Tennessee law enforcement and a mystery case at a Colorado adventure park. Those stories and more at 4 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, let's take a look at the markets very, very briefly. The Dow Jones Industrial had a very good day, up 500 points. That's about 1.6%. S&Ps were up about 50, and the NASDAQ up about almost 150. So all screens are bright green today. John Maxon is standing by over there at Beacon Capital Management with more on what is driving the markets. John, this is the best day since June.
Yeah, best day since June. The market got off to a really strong start, and that was a good sign after both the NASDAQ and the S&P slipped into correction territory. For now, seems to be a lot of relief that what's happening with Hamas and Israel is not spilling over, at least in the region. That's calming some nerves. And oil, Brian, today's down 3.5%, which will definitely help inflation. Now the market's going to start looking and focusing on the Federal Reserve's decision on Wednesday on interest rates. Widely believed that they're going to hold rates exactly where they're at, but the messaging is going to be what's important to really look at. Will they stay higher for longer as far as rates? Also going to get some employment information at the end of the week. So a lot of things happening as the week moves on, but a great day in the market today.
All right. Thank you, John. Learn more about all the things they can do for you over at Beacon Capital Management by going to their website, askbeaconnow.com. It is 59 minutes past the hour of 3 o'clock.
.401, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 44 degrees, a cloudy day in Nashville. And a freeze warning going into effect overnight at 3 a.m. That'll stay in effect until around 9 in the morning for a brief break until it goes back into effect for Middle Tennessee, and will stay there until Wednesday morning. Got a traffic and weather forecast coming up in 5 minutes. In the nation's capital, the House expected to vote later this week on a measure offering additional funding for Israel. It's just one portion of the president's asks, which also include more money for Ukraine, Taiwan, and border security. Stephen Portnoy.
The House Republican bill would send roughly $14.5 billion in additional aid to Israel, offset by equal cuts to the IRS. Democrats are likely to see that pay-for provision as a poison pill. The White House says it expects Congress to pass aid for Israel and for Ukraine on an emergency basis without spending cuts elsewhere.
And staying in the nation's capital, President Biden signed an executive order today that he says will make the development of artificial intelligence safer for Americans. It was at a speech in the White House where Mr. Biden said his executive order invokes the Defense Production Act, which was used during the pandemic. The president said this time he's using the law to require companies to explain how they're using AI.
That means companies must tell the government about the large-scale AI systems they're developing and share rigorous independent test results to prove they pose no national security or safety risk to the American people. Mr.
Biden went on to say that AI must be governed. Right now in Tennessee, widow of Mark Capps, the Grammy award-winning sound engineer, was killed in an officer-involved shooting, has now filed a civil lawsuit saying that the police are responsible for his, quote, unnecessary death. In January of this year, Capps was killed by a SWAT officer for allegedly holding his family at gunpoint and threatening to kill them. Tara Capps now claims that her spouse did not pose an imminent threat of harm to law enforcement and did not point a gun at them or SWAT members. The lawsuit says that the SWAT officer fired a shot at Capps within seconds of entering the home. And a mystery unfolding in Colorado. A heavily armed man found dead inside an adventure park on Saturday. Details now just being released. Alex Stone.
When workers arrived at the Glenwood Caverns Adventure Park, they found a man dead inside of the park. His death not related to any of the rides. The park had been closed, and the Garfield County Sheriff saying the man entered illegally when nobody was around. But the 22-year-old was dressed in tactical clothing, had law enforcement-like patches, was heavily armed with a semi-automatic rifle and handgun, multiple loaded magazines, body armor, a ballistic helmet, and had improvised explosive devices on him. The sheriff saying the man could have carried out an attack of devastating proportions. An investigation is underway.
And that is the latest news, traffic, and weather on the way. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Good afternoon, everybody. 8 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock on Super Talk. Brian Wilson in the chair for hour number 2 on this 30th day of October, one day short of Halloween. Let's get you home safely so that, you can make sure that you are prepared for all the little ghosties and goblins that come to your door tomorrow night. It's going to be cold, by the way. I mean, they're going to be cold little goblins. Because we got a freeze coming.
Well, that's what all the sugar you're giving them for, is to get them all worked up
and
keep them warm.
Yeah, that's right. Well, whatever we can do to help. Listen, we since we were with you last week on Friday, we have a resolution to this incident involving the guy up in Maine that they'd been looking for. They found him over the weekend. This is the man who killed 18 people, injured 13 others in Maine. And they found him inside a box trailer at the Maine Recycling Corporation, according to the Maine's Public Safety Commissioner, Michael Soschuk. It's unclear how long he'd been dead. When he left his house, apparently he left some weapons. He left a note that included information about his cell phone number, password. Get into his cell phone, and also bank account information, how people could access his bank accounts. It wasn't said to be a suicide note, but it had the tone and tenor of an individual who would not be around. Seemed as if he knew that it was going to be not ending well for him at some point. So he killed himself before police could locate him. He had 2 guns on him. He had several other guns back at the house, which he did not carry with him. And it took about 48 hours for that thing to come to a conclusion. But I think there are still remaining questions, and you know what's going to happen. I mean, the Democrats are already making noises. Oh, we need gun control. Gun control is the answer. And I look at this and I say, well, look, I'm not in favor of gun control, but I am in favor of having a system where people who are clearly nuts, and this guy was nuts. Let's just be honest about it. He was exhibiting signs of paranoia. He thought people were talking about him behind his back, and he heard voices. I mean, I don't know about you, but in my book, that's a classic. That's a classic nut job. Somebody who needs help, by the way, but in the process of getting help, maybe, just maybe, it's in the best interest of law enforcement to at least have a conversation about whether or not the individual has guns, or to run a check and find out if indeed they have guns, and if whether or not this person is a danger to himself or others. I don't know. People say they don't like the red flag laws, and I don't like the red flag laws that were being proposed here in Tennessee for sure. In Maine, they have something called a yellow flag law, which says that police can indeed, without being asked to by the family, go in and secure weapons if a person has been involuntarily admitted into a hospital for observation. At least the last time he was in for observation, it was done voluntarily, and therefore the alarm bells didn't go off. Nobody reported it, and he never got checked out, even after he was there for, I think, 2 weeks. Nobody could apparently pull the trigger on the yellow flag law. There's another question, though, about an earlier stop that he had when he was in the military. He was in the reserves, and apparently was doing his time over at the actual Army Academy at West Point, and they were so concerned about him, they took him over for observation, and he was there for a while. Now, the question is, did they have an obligation at that point to then trigger the yellow flag law? And that seems to be still an open question about what did they do, and did they follow up, and did they do everything they should have done? Breitbart has the story, puts it this way: 2 relevant questions. Did Card's mental evaluation at West Point Hospital in mid-July of 2023 not reach the level of an involuntary commitment? Or 2, did someone drop the ball in reporting an involuntary commitment to the National Instant Crime Background Check System, the NICS, to prevent passage of a background check? And those are the questions. But apparently Saucechuck says you can volunteer for treatment for months on end, but if you're not forcibly committed to seek that treatment, it's very specific to treatment, then it does not qualify as being involuntarily committed. What is the solution here? I'm going to open up the phones because, look, we've been through a situation here in Nashville where we had a shooter who clearly was going through some kind of therapy, clearly going through, sex change therapy. No doubt about that. We wish we knew more about what was behind her thinking when she went into the Covenant School, but we don't because we've not been able to see any of those writings or any of those manifestos, as they are called. So what is the solution here? I mean, look, I don't like the idea of government getting in my chili and knowing a whole lot about what kind of weapons I have and being all up in my business about my Second Amendment rights, which I believe very, very clearly what the Second Amendment says. But the Second Amendment, I don't know if they ever contemplated the fact that there would be people who are just bonkers and not safe to have weapons. How can we resolve this? 615-737-9986. Again, very clear in the last session of our state legislature that there was not going to be the passage of what the governor wanted, which was a red flag law. He said it wasn't a red flag law. But we do have a situation where crazy people should not be in the possession of weapons. Think about the Waffle House shooter. In that particular case, the dad took away the weapons, but then, for some reason that is unclear to just about everybody, gave the weapons back. Now, the dad is facing charges, but the person who carried out the shootings at the Waffle House did not have any pings on his record, nothing that raised any suspicion. But clearly, the guy had very serious mental issues and was found at one point to be not competent to stand trial. Look, I don't like gun control. I don't want the government messing with my stuff, but I think community public safety requires from time to time that there be a process. What's the solution? Or do you think there should be no solution and we just should, try to deal with this? I think, quite frankly, the solution is making sure that people who get committed, if they're not safe, not be allowed back out for a while. But that seems to be a lost idea. Start with Jerry in Nashville. Jerry, you're on with Brian on the Drive. What's your thought?
Hey, Brian, I'm a law enforcement professional. Been one for a number of years, and I think that the mental health professionals have to make this call, and they have to make it a lot more freely than they do. There's emergency committals, but, as far as volunteer treatment, they have to make that call as well, because you're asking a police officer to try to make that call on the scene of something, and we see people at their worst, so it's not a fair judgment, in my opinion, to just, sometimes it's obvious, but you're seeing people in a stressful situation or when they're having a meltdown or whatever, and we take them in to get evaluated, and if they turn them loose and don't report, I just don't know what you expect police officers to do in most cases.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very difficult thing, because you say, as I think correctly, that you're going to see people at their very worst, but once you get them out of that situation and they get a chance to regain their composure, are they crazy? I don't know. Probably, they have to make a determination call at that point. But look, let's just talk about, Jerry, for a moment, the Waffle House shooter, the Covenant shooter, this guy in Maine. Do we need to have something that gives somebody in the process, at least on a temporary basis, the ability to say, I don't know if this person should be let loose, because they could be a harm to themselves or others?
Well, that's just it. All we can do is say, are you a danger to yourself or others? And if we can't make that determination, there's no way we can take guns. The mental health people are the professionals at that, and they're the ones going to have to make that call.
Well, let me ask you, if a guy says that he's hearing voices and thinks that people are out to get him, that's a pretty clear sign. Wouldn't you agree, though, if it got before a mental health official that somebody should have made that call?
Yeah, and in that case, I would try to get him hooked up with a mental health professional. But, I mean, if he hasn't violated the law, I enforce laws. That's what I do. And,
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Jerry. Greatly appreciate that perspective. Aubrey in Murfreesboro, what's your thought about it, Aubrey?
I just believe that there is a need for medical professionals to have a facility to put these people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the problem. Is back in the day when I was a young adult, we had a place in Nashville that was called Central State, and that's exactly what it was for. And you just don't have that in the type of facilities for the number of people that obviously have these mental conditions now. So the mental professionals are important, but you've got to have a facility to put these people.
All right. I think you're right, and I hope that part of that got addressed in the last session, where they did talk about the need for more mental health dollars to make sure that you had the capacity to evaluate people. I do think that was something that the state legislature got right in the last session. I really do. Bonnie in Lebanon, you're up with Brian on the drive. What do you say, Bonnie?
Yes, the lady that just made the remark, I agree with her. But when someone's done something so crazy like that man in Maine, who cares if they're crazy? Who cares if they have horns coming out of their ears? Who cares if their parents were mean to them and what did they do to them? I lived in an orphanage for 6.5 years with 400 and something children in Spring Hill. I'm not ashamed to say I didn't put myself there, but, I've learned a lot about people's personalities and stuff like that. But at the same token, when it comes to this, who cares where they come from? They need to be on trial, and they need to pay for what they did.
Yeah, and they're saying that, that if he had been found, he might not have been able to stand trial because he clearly was not thinking right. But if he wasn't thinking right, why didn't this happen? Somewhere in the system, didn't it send off the alarm bells? How many times do we hear these stories? Everybody knew he was a little off. Everybody knew that man was crazy as a bedbug. Everybody knew that he was the person who was going to cause problems somewhere down the line, and yet nobody does anything. I think, family members have a responsibility, but family members are too emotionally involved to make a clearly viewed assessment of the situation. And, he had two opportunities where he was brought in, or one was voluntary and one where he was brought in as part of his military requirements, and nobody thought to pull the trigger on the yellow flag law, to use a very bad pun, and I apologize for that thumb. Let's go to Brian, who's a therapist. What do you think, Brian? You're on with Brian on the drive.
Brian, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, I think obviously there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to this. I mean, you have one extreme end, which is take everybody's guns, which we know that's not going to happen.
That's never going to happen and shouldn't.
Realistically, absolutely not. And I think one piece is finding a balanced approach. But as a mental health therapist, I don't deal with a lot of people that are severely mentally ill, such as this man here clearly was. And I think one of the biggest things I run into is there's just not enough help. We don't have enough trained therapists. And beyond this, when there's been the few times I've encouraged, because I can't make anyone go to the hospital, I can strongly encourage. I've had some teenagers through the years that needed to be hospitalized and things like that.
Yeah.
And parents got involved and they went to the hospital and things got better. I've encouraged some adults to go to the hospital, other things like that. So on my end as a therapist, most therapists, it is really a strong encouragement and indication of, hey, you need to go to the hospital, you need further treatment. But in addition to that, there simply are not enough mental health facilities in this area, in the Middle Tennessee area. There's not enough mental health facilities. And then in addition to that, when you get to people that are higher level trained, such as psychiatric nurse practitioners and actual psychiatrists, doctors, MDs that specialize in this,
right,
there really aren't enough of those either. And a lot of the MDs that I know of that are, psychiatrists, actually they're not really doing therapy. They do a lot of med checks for
Right.
clinical oversight of bigger facilities
Brian,
and things like that.
I want to continue this conversation. Can you hold for just a moment? All right, we got to take a commercial break here. We maybe get one more thought in before we have to go to news. It is now 23 past the hour. A lot of diagnoses out there, and there's a pill for everything, but not all diagnoses are accurate and not all pills are good for you. If you get a diagnosis for European auto repair, stop. Get a second opinion before you make a major decision. And EuroFix is the home for second opinions. Before you spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars on European vehicle repair from a diagnosis, go to EuroFix. It can not only save your vehicle's life, but could save you from a lot of stress. Listen, at EuroFix, you get a free 15-minute no-wrench inspection with an estimate at every visit. No high-pressure sales tactics. That's not part of what they do. At EuroFix, you'll get a 3-year nationwide warranty and a free loaner car with every repair appointment. At EuroFix, you never pay dealer prices. They have several locations to choose from: Franklin, 100 Oaks, Murfreesboro, Belmead, and now Mount Juliet. Call 844-EuroFix or visit myEuroFix.com. Tell them Brian Wilson sent you.
I wanted to touch on the history of Tethered and kind of how it came about.
There's a handful of us that were already using similar equipment. At the time, however, you couldn't just go to the store and buy saddle equipment. It just didn't exist. And selfishly, we just were making gear that nobody else would make for us and that we wanted ourselves. And our goal was just to make enough to break even. Fortunately for everybody involved, it took off. It's got an appeal. People really liked it.
When you think of a saddle, that's what I think of. That's the first name that I think of when I hear about a saddle.
For me, the reason I got into it was I'm hunting public land, and most of the time I'm going pretty deep. Being lightweight and mobile was huge. I walk in with a pack and my bow. That's it. The more I did it, I was like, man, there's so many features here that are helping me improve as a hunter, where I can take different shot angles and stuff. And I'm going to tell you, I feel safe with this rope all the time.
Yeah.
From the ground up, I'm hooked in. If I fall off this thing, I'm just going to swing a little bit. And I think the learning curve is small. It's just about getting comfortable with your equipment. It's the biggest thing. And for me, it's repetition and then fine-tuning that to meet my needs. And that's the cool thing. What I like and what might meet my needs might be a little different from you. And even though we're doing the same thing, you can tweak it to meet your needs. And I really like that aspect about it.
But we've done a really good job of just innovating and creating products that don't exist. You're seeing the growth of the sport. You're seeing the innovation. And you're seeing all of these cool things that we make, and it's because we actually use it.
More aid could be on the way to Israel. A man arrested and accused of purposefully setting a house on fire in Tennessee. And the latest from Wall Street. I'm Mac Morey, coming up at 6:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Talking about the shooting up in Maine, we got a guy who was hearing voices and was exhibiting signs of paranoia. Everybody out to get him. talking to Brian, who's a therapist up in Columbia. Brian, if you had a patient and that was the symptoms that were presented before you, what kind of options do you have as a mental health professional?
Well, initially what I have to do is let everybody know that, when you first come, 3 limits of confidentiality, and one big one is if I believe you're a danger to yourself or someone else. So without breaking, I'd have to determine how serious this was. Of course, at first, evaluate in office. But if I quickly saw that someone really was clearly a danger to themselves, probably my first step, and I'm kind of thinking on the fly here because I've not particularly encountered this exact situation, but the first step would be some in-office evaluation. Okay, how serious is this? Is this a one-time thing? That sort of thing. And then it would quickly escalate to a number of who would be the emergency contact, depending on the age of the person. If they're a minor, I'm calling parents, that sort of thing. And then it gets into a matter, depending on, what they're saying. If they were saying things like they are going to hurt themselves, they're going to hurt someone else, we get into a place where I could call law enforcement or something like that.
Are you allowed to ask them about what weapons they might have?
I'm sorry, say it again.
I said, are you allowed to ask them a question about what weapons they might have?
Yeah, I believe, yes, I could ask questions like that. And I think generally, Brian, it would be a situation, we all exaggerate sometimes, say, I'd like to kill him, or, just making jokes like that or making statements like that. And understanding, in the context, no, you're not really going to hurt someone. But this individual, from what I understand, he had some very clear things that were being said in his mind. He was really out to hurt people. And asking about weapons, one of the things I always get into, if someone ever indicates they might be suicidal or something like that, do you have a plan? Okay, what's your plan? Do you have access to weapons? So, yeah, I would eventually get to that point.
Get to that, right.
Asking about a weapon, something, because it needs to be pretty specific. And on my end, man, there would be a lot of paperwork, lots of note-taking and things like that, just to cover myself as a professional as well. But once I contact law enforcement, yeah, you would, it would be pretty specific about, what was said, what I could do or not do, that kind of thing. What's the threat they've made? Do they have access to a weapon? Yes, he says he has a gun or something like that, and I would try to find out as much as I could.
All right, I got you. Listen, I don't know that we've solved anything here, but I really was very helpful to have your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Drive.
Bye.
And it's now 30 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock.
It is 4:30. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories right now. 43 degrees, cloudy, wet, cold in Tennessee, and it's going to be that way for this week. Maybe not as wet, but definitely as cold. Got a freeze warning going into effect overnight here tonight. That'll be in effect until Wednesday morning. Full weather forecast, latest traffic report on the way in 5 minutes. The Biden administration defending Israel's military operation in northern Gaza today as Israeli troops appear to move deeper into Palestinian territory. As the operation expands, the United Nations expressed concern today about Israeli airstrikes hitting closer to hospitals where tens of thousands of Palestinians are sheltering alongside thousands of wounded. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby says the administration still believes Israel is taking steps to minimize civilian casualties. Kirby also said Israel has committed to allowing more aid into Gaza.
We had 45 or so get in yesterday. We're hoping that we can get some more in today, but obviously, even with the increase, it's going to take time to make up the difference. And we know there's an awful lot that needs to happen to accelerate and to increase that flow of aid.
And there have been 60 UN staff who've been killed in Gaza since the start of this conflict. Crime right now in Tennessee. News 2 reports that a man has been accused of intentionally setting a house on fire. 36-year-old Roman Winkler was arrested yesterday, the day after a home in Huntington went up into flames. His bond has been set at $250,000. Now over to some money news. Here's Daria Albinger.
Stocks closed higher to start the week. The Dow soared 511 points. It had been up more than 570. The Nasdaq rose 146. The S&P closed up 45. Treasury yields are also climbing ahead of reports that could guide what the Federal Reserve does with interest rates. The World Bank is warning oil prices could be pushed to historic highs if the violence between Israel and Hamas intensifies. The UAW strike is a step closer to ending. General Motors reached a deal with union members workers just a few days after Jeep maker Stellantis did, and about a week after union members who work for Ford did. All three need to ratify the deals. Despite high prices and, in many cases, our own gloomy outlook about the economy, we're still spending a lot. Consumer spending rose a brisk 0.4% in September, but economists caution that can't continue for much longer, as many people are pulling money out of their savings and increasingly turning to credit cards.
And that is the latest news, traffic, and weather on the way. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Hey everybody, Dan Mattis with Nashville's Morning News on WTN. I'm here at the Nashville Rescue Mission doing the interviews that I look forward to doing every single year. These are incredible stories of people who have had amazing recoveries. Thanks to this amazing facility, they are able to get clean and lead a more productive life. The date of our annual radiothon is going to be Monday, November 20th. Listen in and please donate. You can get more information at 99.7 WTN, including a link to the website for Nashville's Rescue Mission.
I mean, it's got to be cold. They're telling you to bring in your tender plants. What about the tender you inside the house if your heater's not working? Well, you need to call the number I would call, 615-775-7833. That's Busy Bee, HVAC and Plumbing. They'll come right over, buzz right over to your hive and fix whatever is ailing your system as soon as they possibly can. You're not going to find a better value on HVAC and plumbing replacement systems if you need to replace something. I mean, they don't last forever. They'll give you all your options. They'll give you plan A, plan B. But listen, if you have any questions about your services, all you do is just call the office, that same number, 615-775-7833. Ask for William or Brandon, the owners. They will take care of you. I believe in good preventative maintenance. And that's what you get with the Beehive Club. Starts at $99. 3 thorough maintenance services on your systems, one aimed at heating, one aimed at cooling, one aimed at plumbing. No overtime charges, 24/7, 10% off all repairs. For satisfaction guaranteed, call Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling, 615-775-7833, online at busybeehvac.com. It's 39 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock. Hey, how you doing out there? 30th day of October, and Halloween's tomorrow, and the little ghoulies and goblins and ghosties are going to have to put on a coat. It's going to be about 40 degrees at trick or treat time tomorrow. That's hard to say. Trick or treat time tomorrow. Wow. So, listen, bundle them up. The costumes will still be cute, even if you're wearing a coat. That's okay.
Mom, I can't see it if it's wearing a coat.
I know.
Kids are screaming everywhere.
I know. But get this. Tonight, before sunrise tomorrow, between 3 and 9 o'clock, a freeze warning in effect here in Middle Tennessee. Temperature should reach around 28 degrees.
Ooh.
Yeah, man. And then you think that's bad. Yeah, it is. But Wednesday, I guess into Tuesday, into Wednesday morning, 24 degrees. So, and so what should you do? Well, I know that the major thing that was on Cabana Wife's mind was saving all of her tender plants.
Oh, you got to do that.
Yeah. And so, we have a tremendous number of plants. And the plants are the bane of my existence because, they're, no, not really. I mean, it's like having a pet. You gotta water the plants, again. So it's a lot of work to have plants, which is why when I was a bachelor, I had no plants. I didn't want to have to deal with plants.
Simplifies things, yeah.
Normally, if I got a plant, it was like a cactus or something,
Go
something
months without attention.
Yeah, you put it there on the windowsill in your kitchen, and it's fine. It's going to be okay. Yeah, give it a drop or two of water every once in a while. Everything's good. But no, these plants, they're high maintenance, and so we save our plants from year to year because we don't believe in. I mean, I thought, well, why not? How expensive can these plants be? Why don't we just start with new plants, good fresh plants every spring? And I was told that would cost a lot of money.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
So we moved them all into the garage, and we put a grow light. So now, anybody who passes by thinks we're probably growing pot in our garage or something. I don't know. We put a grow light on them so that they will continue to survive through the winter. But will they really?
They'll probably survive, but they probably won't be as healthy as they would if it had been outdoors in nice weather, I guess.
Yeah. And then, so they say tomorrow, if you have plants outside that are sensitive that you want to cut. So apparently we still have tomatoes. We still have, the most expensive tomatoes known to mankind are grown in my backyard. Because we don't get that many tomatoes, but by gosh, we got a lot of tomato plants. And so we're going to have to cover them up. They're still producing at this point. So I don't know. It says cover sensitive plants or bring them inside. It goes without saying that if you have animals, you need to take good care of them, make sure that they have a warm place to be. And then you got to think about your water pipes and make sure they're covered. Last year I had a hard time finding those little styrofoam cups that go over your spigots.
Oh yeah, if you wait until right before a freeze comes,
you can't get them. Yeah, they're gone. You go into the Lowe's and you say, hey, I'm looking for some little. Yeah, we haven't had those in days. Did you not look at the long range forecast? And so but I think I've got them. I think I'm covered on that. And the question is, how long am I going to run the pool? That's the big question.
Ooh, yeah, got to make that decision.
Well, it's heated. But last year I found out between heating my house and heating the pool, I received a natural gas bill that was almost $1,000. And I very quickly decided I didn't really want to keep the pool heated that long. So, right now it's a balmy 85 degrees in my pool.
Ooh, I bet it would feel nice to jump in.
Yeah, it would feel nice. Scamper out there and then jump in. And then you really got to scamper back.
Yeah, that's the bad part.
That's the bad part. I mean, you think about, it'd be great to get out in the pool and it's 85 degrees. But then you got to think, how long is that walk back to the house?
Yeah.
And I don't move that fast anymore.
You got to go up those stairs. You got to watch that.
Yeah, that's right. It'll be coated in ice by the time I got to the door. Other news that happened over the weekend, by the way, that we want to say good news. The GM plant in Spring Hill went on strike, but they have just apparently ended the strike, so they didn't have to be out there very long. General Motors and United Auto Workers have reached a tentative agreement. Stellantis reached an agreement. Ford reached an agreement, so it looks like the strike is over, and so the folks out there down south are not going to have to be on the picket line much longer. They'll be inside before it gets cold, thank goodness. And it sounds like they came out pretty well. So glad that is over. Something else that happened this morning, having to do with the border. I love these border stories. And in Texas, God bless the governor of the state of Texas, and God bless the people of Texas for putting up the money for all of this, because the borders are just wide open, as you know, and the Texas Department of Public Safety, the Texas Rangers, the Texas National Guard, even the Tennessee National Guard is over there now, trying to do what they can to make sure that folks don't come across the border unimpeded, but they do anyway. So the idea Texas had was, well, let's put up some of that barbed wire, big coils of barbed wire along the border on our side. And that was all good and fine. And by the way, pretty effective in shutting down people waiting across the Rio Grande River, until the Biden administration came in with wire cutters and clipped them all and just pulled them back. So Texas sued them, and guess what? A federal judge issued an extraordinary temporary restraining order Monday, which bars the Biden administration from destroying or tampering with the temporary concertina wire installed by the Texas to protect its border in Mexico. This came from Chief U.S. District Judge Alia Moses in Del Rio, ruled Texas had a likelihood of prevailing in the lawsuit and would suffer significant harm if federal officials were allowed to keep dismantling the fence. It was a stinging rebuke to the Homeland Security Secretary and a win for states seeking to enforce border security on their own in the absence of help from the federal government. More than 10 million now. This is the new number that came out. 10 million immigrants have illegally entered the United States under Joe Biden's policies, according to new federal data. The plaintiff preliminarily establishes that it would face irreparable harm without a temporary restraining order, and said Judge Moses in a 11-page decision. The court shall grant the temporary relief requested, with one important exception: for any medical emergency that most likely would result in serious bodily injury or death to the person, absent any boats or other life-saving apparatus. So if you got somebody that's, I guess, drowning, and you wanted to cut through the wire, that would be okay, but that's the only exception. By the way, that 10 million number, we told you that on Friday that 8.3 million people have illegally entered the United States since January of 21, since Joe Biden stood and took the oath of office, which would make that basically the 13th largest state. The National Pulse says, well, that doesn't include the so-called gotaways, which come in at 1.7 million. So if you add 1.7 to 8.3, you get 10 million people. I don't know what size state that would be, but it would be, the other day it was like the 13th state right behind Virginia, so I guess it comes up a couple of notches. Unbelievable that we have 10 million people in this country. And by the way, that 1.7 million, it's just a guess. We don't really know how many gotaways got away. We have no clue. And these are the known gotaways, not the unknown gotaways. What about the ones we never saw? Thousands of miles of southern border. There are people getting across the border that we don't know anything about whatsoever. Gotaways or not gotaways, we don't know about them. But I think 10 million now is the right number to go with, and it changes the entire demographics of this country. 10 million people coming across the border since Joe Biden became president. President Trump says he thinks that the number is really probably more like 15 million, and he might be right. Let me just look this up. Will you bear with me while I do this? What size are the states? So I did this before, and it came in 13th, but that was at 8.3. So population, yeah, don't you just love me doing internet research during the show of states? Okay, here we go. Order population. Well, Georgia has 10 million people in it. And so this would be right up there against Georgia. Okay, here we go. 7, let's see. Virginia. It would be right at the same size as the state of Michigan. 10 million people in Michigan. 10,500,000 in North Carolina. Georgia has 10,799,000, 10,000,008. So it would probably come in right at number 10 or 11. Wow, that's a lot of people who are going to change the demographics of this country for many, many, many years to come. 50 minutes now past the hour of 4 o'clock on Super Talk.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. When we get to retirement, what do we want to do? We want to go and kick back, right? But we also want to take an income from our investment portfolios. And there are a lot of common myths that I hear about how do you take an income from an investment portfolio. One is that people will get into, this was really big a few years ago, really big, real estate investment trust. Now, real estate gets rented and it kicks off an income, and then you have some kind of dividend that's paid, and because the REIT has to pay out most of the dividend, it's a great way to take income in retirement. But what happens, like what happened recently, when all of a sudden the properties go unrented? What happens to your income? Bye-bye, it's gone. Another thing that I see is this: people buy stocks or stock mutual funds that are dividend paying, and what we'll do is we'll live off the dividends. Well, what is the dividend? It's part of the earnings of the company. So you got the earnings of the company, right? And then what happens is the company may pay out some of the dividend, and they call that a dividend when they pay it out, or they may retain some of it, and it's called retained earnings. Well, the problem is this: what if the company's earnings go down? Just like the real estate investment trust up here, what if the earnings go down? What happens to your dividend? It goes away. All of a sudden, it's bye-bye to your retirement income. So what do we want to do? We want to diversify way better. If you look at the academic research on investing and how to take income from a portfolio, quite often what it is saying, okay, I'm going to have some money in various asset classes. Large companies, small companies, value companies, growth companies, international companies, short-term bonds and intermediate bonds, and so on and so forth. And what I do is I look at these different areas of the market, and they have a historic return. And what happens if the portfolio does this area of the market does better than this one? Well, in that particular year, I'm going to take income from this part of the portfolio. Then the next year, maybe this area does better than everything else. I'll take income from there. So what I'm doing is diversifying, which is an age-old concept. I mean, good grief, Nobel Prize winning concept of investing. And I actually apply it to taking income from a portfolio. So why is it that we often see this kind of stuff? It's because of the fees and the commissions and all of the incentives to sell you things that maybe aren't in your best interest. And a lot of advisors, you look at it, they aren't held to a fiduciary standard. In other words, they don't have to keep your best interest first. Paul Winkler, Inc., we hold ourselves voluntarily to that standard, and we actually disclose it in our disclosure brochures. So if you want to know more about what we do and learn more and educate along the way, go to paulwinkler.com. Set up a free 15-minute phone call so that you can learn more, become an educated investor. First step is easy. paulwinkler.com, free 15-minute phone call, and get started ASAP, because you can't afford to wait. You've got to make sure you get this right. You don't get a second shot.
Israeli Prime Minister addressing his country today on the ground offensive and making a big claim while doing so. Student loans are back and Halloween is here, and so are the safety precautions from law enforcement that come with that holiday. Those stories and more coming up 5 o'clock. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Listen, there are a bunch of different kind of eye drops that are being recalled right now, and this is a serious thing because it could lead to potential loss of vision. Listen, they are brands that are carried by CVS, Leader, Rugby, Rite Aid, and Target's Up and Up brand. So if you have any of those, throw them away and do not use them. The warnings come from the Federal Drug Administration and say that apparently the products were made in insanitary conditions and could contain bacteria that could lead to vision loss. Not a good thing. Yeah. So you take no chances. 58 minutes now past the hour of 4 o'clock on Super Talk.
Five o'clock, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 43 degrees on Music Row, cloudy and wet day. And got a freeze warning going into effect overnight in Middle Tennessee. So you got any plants outside, anything like that you want to take care of? Maybe bring that back inside. Latest traffic report, weather forecast coming up in about 5 minutes. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the country today in Tel Aviv amid the weekend's expanded ground operations inside Gaza. The address also included a passionate declaration that Israel will not agree to a ceasefire under any circumstance.
I want to make clear Israel's position regarding a ceasefire. Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th.
Netanyahu continued by saying that this is the time for everyone to decide if they're willing to fight for a future of hope and promise. And meanwhile, the IDF is continuing that expanded ground operation into Gaza as they're making it closer to Gaza City in the north. Student loans, it's been just 1 month since borrowers once again began repaying their student loan debts, but it hasn't been going smoothly. Andy Field with the latest from Washington.
The U.S. Education Department reports more than 800,000 Americans missed their first student loan payment since the government ended the 3-year pandemic pause. One of the largest payment processors, Mohila, gave borrowers just 7 days' notice, not the required 21 days, the government punishing the company by docking it more than $7 million. There are other federal student loan repayment glitches, including incorrect bills or double charging for debt that was already paid.
Some crime in Tennessee. A Nashville man, 37-year-old Jose Rafael Alvarengo Natarin, was arrested over the weekend after officials say he chased his family around with a knife while he was drunk. It was at a home on Millwood Drive. The victim said that her boyfriend chased her and her son and daughter into a bathroom with a large knife, and they hid in that bathroom. They called 911. He's now jailed on a $45,000 bond. And Halloween, it's here tomorrow. With so many kids and families taking the streets, going door to door for that candy, Channel 4's Jordan James takes a look at what is being done in Mount Juliet to keep everyone safe.
Here in Mount Juliet, preparations are well underway, and officials tell me they have one goal in mind, and that's to keep everyone safe. Ahead of the holiday, the police department made arrangements to triple their staff to ensure that they are more visible while folks are trick-or-treating. They also release reminders to parents about accompanying their children, checking their candy, and wearing reflective clothing to practice roadway safety, things that they say can make a huge difference.
And Mount Juliet officials also going to be handing out reflective bracelets to prevent any children from getting hit by cars. That is the latest news, traffic, and weather on the way. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Hey there, hi there, ho there. It's 7 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock on Super Talk. We're in hour number 3 of the drive. Man, it's just zipping by on this 30th day of October. And so just the thing you need to know most, I mean, on a day like today, I really don't mind when weather is the lead. It's going to get cold tonight. 28 degrees, that's below freezing, so you have been forewarned. Take care of your tender plants and your tender animals. And you know, make sure your heater's working and all that kind of stuff. Because this first night, you're really going to have the heater. There's no doubt about it.
I think there are going to be a lot of people that will wake up in the morning and realize that their heater is not working.
That's right.
It's usually how it works, right? First time you need it, and then it's like, oh, where is it?
Yeah. I always like to check mine out early in the season.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Check it out a little. Well, that's why I have Busy Bee, you know, and they come by and they do the 3 checks a year.
That's true. Yeah,
I'm telling you, it's a good plan. Okay, didn't mean that to turn into a commercial. I'm just saying, you know, it's going to get cold tonight, so you know, do the things you need to do. Pull the blankets out. I want to start by talking about what's going on with Israel, but maybe we'll start with what's going on with Israel in this country and with your tax dollars, okay? I think that there is wide-ranging approval in Congress to provide more aid to Israel. And so today we got from the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Boy, I tell you, I'm liking this guy a lot. At least initially, it sounds like this is a guy that I think we're all going to really enjoy having as Speaker. We had to wait for him, but I think we got a good one in the wait. That's the way it feels. House Republicans unveiled a $14.3 billion aid package for Israel on Monday, a show of support for the embattled U.S. ally. But hold on a minute. You say, well, I'm not big on foreign aid. Well, here's 2 things that are very different about this foreign aid as compared to what the Biden administration wants. Number 1, it is not tied to Ukraine aid. That will be considered separately. Now, I'm going to be first to tell you, I think inside Congress there is still a lot of support to continue aid to Ukraine, but it's a more controversial question. There is more wide-ranging support for the idea of providing aid to Israel at this difficult time. So $14.3 billion. And here's the other thing, and I love this, man. I think this is great. Speaker Johnson is saying, okay, you want $14.3 billion in aid for Israel? We do too, but you know what? That money is going to come out of something, someplace else. We're not just going to print money and send it overseas. And you know where he wants to take it? You're going to love this. He wants to take it in cuts from the Internal Revenue Service. Remember that $18 billion that they got to hire a bunch of people? That's where he wants that money to come from. The cuts would affect funds included in the Democrats' sweeping tax, health, and climate bill, which was mislabeled the Inflation Reduction Act, signed into law last year. The package also deviates from the White House strategy of linking aid for Ukraine and Israel, according to thehill.com, a fact that could make it more difficult to get the bill over the finish line. Well, I don't know. If you want it, and there's a universal need for it, maybe these are the things that have to happen. But at least that's a great negotiating position to start out. It would give $4 billion for Israel's Iron Dome and what they call the David's Sling defense system, another $1.2 billion for something known as the Iron Beam defense system. The package is one of the first pieces of legislation introduced under Speaker Mike Johnson, who assumed the top job last week. House Rules will take up the legislation on Wednesday. Members of both parties and chambers have emphasized the importance of supporting Israel. And last week, the House overwhelmingly approved a resolution backing Israel and condemning Hamas, which was the first piece of legislation passed during Johnson's speakership. So, given the fact that there's overwhelming support for that resolution, there probably will be overwhelming support in the House for it, although Democrats may balk at taking the money away from the IRS. Senate Foreign Relations Chair Ben Cardin says the IRS funding is a non-starter. Oh, well, okay, then fine. You be the one to tell Israel that they can't have any money because you want to spend more money on IRS staffers who are going to be harassing taxpayers in the future. So there you go. Like it. Now, talking about what's happening on the ground in Israel, the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, you hear them referred to that a lot, has gone in a big way. And they are now, is this the biggest part of the ground invasion? No, but it's bigger than what we've seen up until now. The earlier incursions, it seemed, were really designed to create a pathway into Gaza so that you could, get the tanks through there, and that the ground has been cleared of maybe any potential mines or any hazards that are there. So it's like the engineers go in to build a road, right? And now here come the tanks, and here comes our artillery, and here comes all of the infantry now moving into Gaza, taking up positions in northern Gaza near the Ares Gate, and it will apparently they now actually possess the land inside Gaza in the far northwest and northeast quadrant, up there in the corners. And then they're going to systematically come through there and just move their way south. It's going to be slow. It's going to be methodical. It's going to be, I think, immensely effective. And says Benjamin Netanyahu, there is no talk in our minds of a ceasefire.
I want to make clear Israel's position regarding a ceasefire. Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th.
If there was any doubt, there's the answer from Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Ambassador Mark Regev of Israel was talking on Fox today about the top priority of trying to find the hostages.
Humanitarians, they're the opposite of that, and we have to understand the people that we are dealing with. And the people who are our people who are being held hostage, they're in terrible danger. We'll make a maximum effort to get them out. We have to do our best, but it's a formidable circumstance. The idea of trying to get them out is at the top of our agenda. We believe that the military operation and keeping the pressure up on Hamas is a way to facilitate their release. We think that diplomatic pressure on Hamas's friends, their allies in the Middle East, that's another way of getting them out. And that combination is going to get us more people out in the end. Well, I think we all have to understand that anyone who wants to see peace in the Middle East has to see that Hamas is a major problem. They're going to oppose any peace. They're going to oppose any reconciliation. I mean, they say openly, yes, that the Jewish state, my country, has no right to exist, not in any borders. They say openly that any Arab leader who negotiates with Israel is a traitor to Islam and a traitor to the Arab world. And finally, they say every Jew, every Israeli is a legitimate target for murder, for their terrorism. These people oppose peace and reconciliation, and anyone who wants to see a better and more peaceful Middle East has to support Israel in our fight against Hamas.
All right. So how effective can this ground action be at actually dismantling Hamas? This question asked of Admiral Kirby today in the White House briefing room, and he drew on several parallels. He said, look, we can really degrade it. Can you eliminate the ideology behind it? No. Can you degrade the capability of terrorist organizations? He says American experience suggests that, yes, you can.
I'll let the Israelis characterize their ground operations. We're not going to slap bumper stickers on it here from the podium. They can speak to, and they did. They had a press briefing today. Defense Minister Gallant talked about what they're doing. And by all accounts, it appears that what they're trying to do is really put a lot more pressure on Hamas leaders. And when you're trying to go after the leadership of an organization, as we well know from our own experience against ISIS and against Al-Qaeda, putting that pressure, you have to be able to apply a discrete amount of force. And that's easier to apply with soldiers than it is to apply just from the air. So that's what they have described what they're doing, and I think I'll leave it to them. Now, as for your question, can you defeat them, I think is how you put it. Again, you got to be careful with analogies, but what we have, I think, demonstrated to a fairly well is that you can decapitate a terrorist organization, you can decimate their capabilities, you can render them a lot less effective. You're probably never going to get rid of the ideology that backs them up and allows them to recruit and to resource. But look at ISIS right now. It's a shadow of itself. Remember, they were storming across Iraq and Syria with this big caliphate that they wanted to govern. It's a shadow of its former self. Still a viable threat, which is why we have some troops on the ground, but it's nowhere near the threat that it once was. And Al-Qaeda, the same thing. I mean, you can say the most recent intelligence community report analysis that they have been rendered completely ineffective in places like Afghanistan. Doesn't mean that there aren't offshoots. Doesn't mean that they don't try to morph and change into something else. But we think that you can, in fact, have a tremendous impact on a terrorist organization's leadership, their resourcing, their capabilities, their ability to recruit, their ability to operate. Doesn't mean it all goes away, but you can.
And I think with the Israeli forces, the biggest challenge is going to be getting into these tunnels. According to The Guardian, they have a great story here describing what they say is a spider web of tunnels inside Gaza's underground network being targeted by Israel. The last airstrikes, you ready for this? 100 planes hit 150 underground targets. Now, how can you do that from the air? With specially designed bombs, the bunker buster bombs, which are huge, but they have the ability to penetrate deep within the earth before they explode, and that makes them, perfect for that particular role. So how much of it did they destroy? A whole lot of it, except that, some parts of it are difficult to destroy because, well, the metro, the central Hamas sort of command center is right underneath a hospital. You can't get at that without getting on the ground and working your way. So that is something that will have to happen. But there is a little bit of an account from one of the people who's been released by the hostages. I can't begin to say this woman's name. She's 85 years old. She was taken hostage by the Islamist militant group during the raid on Israel. And after her release, she told officials about the tunnels. She said that we went underground and walked for kilometers in wet tunnels for 2 or 3 hours. It's a spider web of tunnels. We went through the tunnels till we reached a large hall. We were 25 people, and they separated us according to which kibbutz we were from. The 5 of us were from the Near Oz kibbutz. Her description is the smallest glimpse of what Israeli military planners and politicians have long depicted as one of the most difficult challenges facing the large-scale military invasion of Gaza. The IDF forces will have their work cut out for them in the tunnels. 20 minutes now, past the hour of 5 o'clock. One of the things I love about Genesis Diamonds is they're always bringing in new and fresh jewelry and diamonds. You're never going to see the same old thing when you visit. With diamonds, they're always bringing in fresh cut stones straight from the world's best diamond cutters, every size you can imagine, including the larger and rarer diamonds, 3 and 5, even 10 carats. Nobody has a diamond selection that can come anywhere close to the folks at Genesis. And with designer jewelry, Genesis is partnering with all of the top designers from New York and Los Angeles, and they are on the cutting edge when it comes to what's in style, what's hot, what's new and different. The stuff you see in Genesis you will not find in any other stores, guaranteed. So it's a constantly moving, constantly changing inventory. There is always something new to see. It's another reason why Genesis dominates the jewelry scene and why people drive for hours to be able to shop at this amazing store. They've got it all. Huge selection, uncompromising quality, unbeatable value, ironclad warranties, and white glove customer service. Genesis Diamonds and luxury pre-owned Rolexes as well. In fact, new Rolexes have just come in. Genesis, official jeweler of the Tennessee Titans, Green Hills, and Cool Springs.
A possible increase in Gaza aid or Israeli aid, a big crash in Tennessee, plus the UAW strike could be coming to an end as an agreement has been reached. That's all coming up at 5:30 right here on Super Talk, 99.7 WTN.
Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport, the thrill of victory, and the agony of defeat.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a fan favorite. You know him, you love him, you can't live without it. Time for Matt Morey's Wide World of Sport, or it could be Mac Morey's Wide World of Sports. He answers to anything. Hey, here is the host of your show, Mac Morey. Woo!
Oh, yeah. Woo! And it is a Victory Monday on today's edition of Mac's Wide World of Sports.
Exactly so. Yeah.
We've got a lot to talk about. You know, we came in on Friday. Oh, what's this season going to be like? 2 wins, trade deadlines coming up. Could things be going from bad to worse for the Tennessee Titans? Hold your horses.
A glimmer of hope.
Come on.
Emerges,
and his name is Will Levis. Wow. 4 touchdown passes for the rookie in his NFL debut, a Titans record, an NFL record, and double the amount of touchdown passes Ryan Tannehill had thrown this whole season in one game. And, you know, it's so funny. All these things work together, right? The passing game connected to the running game, connected to how the offensive line plays, and it seemed like everything worked better. Will Levis had time in the pocket. Derrick Henry had more, holes to run through because, they were passing the ball down the field. The defense had multiple things to think about. It opens up your play caller, and Tim Kelly, he's got more things and more things at his disposal to work with. This just was finally what we thought the Titans could look like on offense, and it wasn't because of Ryan Tannehill. It was because of the new rookie quarterback, Will Levis. Again, 4 touchdown passes, and I mean, all of Nashville was going crazy, as they should have been. What a win, 28-23 against the Falcons. And I mean, the whole outlook on the season now just kind of shifts because of one player, because of one game.
Could it be that we will soon be saying Ryan Tannehill? I mean, honestly,
that's a
this
really
guy
good
looked
question.
good. He looked good, and I mean, was he that good, or was were the Atlanta Falcons that bad?
No, the Atlanta Falcons, I mean, up to this point in the season, in many respects, had a top 10 defense, both in the passing and running game. I mean, their defense was more than competent. And we'll get to the Thursday matchup because that defense is even more so in Pittsburgh Steelers. But no, it was because Will Levis was reading the field and he was giving his guys a chance. You saw Tannehill. Obviously, the offensive line had some issues, but man, he'd hold on to that ball just too long. He'd be looking downfield. He'd be hitching multiple times, and then he'd let go of it too late. It ended an interception or a tipped pass or just a plain old incompletion in the dirt. But Will Levis, you see him just, you know what? I'm going to do this 3-step drop. I'm going to do one hitch. I'm going to find my guy in the one-on-one, and I'm going to let it loose. I'm going to give him a chance to win. And that's what happened because you've got a guy in DeAndre Hopkins who's an elite level talent, and they weren't giving him the ability to show that. Get him a chance. He'll go up and get it. And that's what happened. 3 touchdowns for DeAndre Hopkins out of the 4 that Will Levis threw. And I mean, that 4th one to Nick Westbrook-Akine, he's fallen back. He 7-8 yards behind the line of scrimmage and just kind of loops one up 40 yards right into the breadbasket of Akine in the end zone. I'm telling you, no hyperbole here, guys. I don't think there's 10 quarterbacks in the league who can make that throw. Like just arm talent wise.
Right.
I don't think he's a flick of a wrist. I mean, it's just like you're seeing, Aaron Rodgers do that. The Brett Favre, Dan Marinos of the world back in the day, just kind of flick of the wrist and it goes 50. Levis has that. He has that. And
all right. Oh, but I mean, and I agree with everything you've said there. But Vrabel is a loyal guy.
He is.
And so, you got to wonder if Tannehill gets healthy, will he put him back in the lineup, or will we go with this new guy who seems to be able to bring this offense alive?
It's a great point, Brian. And I think if Tannehill was healthy right now, I think Tannehill would be playing on Thursday and not Will Levis. I think I truly believe that. And the fact that he's not, Will Levis is going to play on Thursday night at Heinz Field against the Steelers. But you're right. What happens if Will Levis maybe takes a step back and comes down to earth against what is a great defense at Heinz Field on Thursday on a short week of preparation and throws a couple interceptions and it's a close loss? Like, what if he just goes straight back to Tannehill and we're here talking about, oh, here's some interceptions. There's Tannehill getting sacked yet again. I don't know. I think you're right. I think that's definitely something to watch if Will Levis maybe doesn't play as well, which, chances are he doesn't.
He probably won't.
This was historic. Come on. This was amazing. You can't ask for a better debut.
But I think this does give Tannehill a much shorter leash going forward.
Oh, yes.
I think Vrabel is got the guy that he knows, okay, he can do it. He proved himself. So if Tannehill just doesn't get it done when he does get back healthy, then I think it's going to be a short leash for him.
I completely agree. Now, the mistake
you
threshold.
could tell where the crowd was for sure.
Oh yeah,
well, no doubt.
The crowd was into it. And again, I really want to stress this fact. Derrick Henry ran for 100 yards. He'd only done that once prior to the season. That is because of the passing game.
Yeah.
That's because the defense had to, sit
had
back.
to worry.
Yes, it had to worry, and that opens it up for a guy like King Henry. Really exciting. Again, we'll be back here in a few days on Max Wide World of Sports because Thursday Night Football going up against the Steelers. It's going to be fun.
All right, now, by the way, real quick, the Oilers unis. Hey.
Oh, keep wearing those.
That's what I'm saying.
Those
man.
look so good.
They really do.
Gosh.
Yep. All right.
I don't know.
You didn't like them?
What?
No, I mean, they were fine, but I mean, they're not the Oilers.
Yeah, but I just dig the colors, the scheme, and the.
I don't, an oil derrick on a Titan uniform. I mean, I understand the desire to have the throwback uniforms and all that, but that's just a one game gimmick.
You can change the logo, yeah, but I mean, you can put the Titans T back up there, but I like the unis otherwise.
Yeah, my man.
All right, good. All right, well, you got to put on your news hat because it's time for the news at 31 minutes past the hour.
.531, I'm Mac Morey with your top stories. Right now, 43 degrees, dreary, cloudy, and a cold day. Freeze warning going to effect overnight starting at 3 a.m. in Middle Tennessee. A full weather forecast, the latest traffic report on the way, 5 minutes. The Biden administration defending Israel's military operation in northern Gaza today, and as Israeli troops appear to move deeper into the Palestinian territory. And as that operation does expand, the United Nations has expressed concerns today about Israeli airstrikes hitting closer to hospitals where tens of thousands of Palestinians are sheltering alongside thousands of wounded. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby says the administration still believes Israel is taking steps to minimize civilian casualties. Kirby also said Israel has committed to allowing more aid into Gaza.
We had 45 or so get in yesterday. We're hoping that we can get some more in today. But obviously, even with the increase, it's going to take time to make up the difference. And we know there's an awful lot that needs to happen to accelerate and to increase that flow of aid.
And 60 UN staff have been killed in Gaza since the start of this conflict. A big crash in Tennessee, a 5-vehicle crash in Murfreesboro on Saturday night resulted in 3 people injured. One car caught on fire in the crash. There was a 24-year-old driver trapped in that vehicle that officials had to rescue. It all started with a Dodge Ram 1500 hitting the back of a car that caused a domino effect. Charges may be pending based on the outcome of this investigation. No one in critical condition from the crash. President Biden addressing the agreements reached between the UAW and the big 3 automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. Karen Travers.
President Biden said he spoke with UAW President Shawn Fain Monday about the agreements the Auto Workers Union has reached with the big 3 automakers, Ford, Stellantis, and General Motors. The president calling it an historic agreement that he says will ensure these iconic companies can still lead the world in quality and innovation.
These record agreements reward auto workers who gave up much to keep the industry working and going during the financial crisis more than a decade ago.
The president says he applauds the UAW and the leaders of the automakers for agreeing that all workers on strike can go back to work immediately, even before a vote on the agreement is taken.
And that is the latest news, traffic, and weather on the way. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Hey everybody, Dan Mattis with Nashville's Morning News on WTN. I'm here at the Nashville Rescue Mission doing the interviews that I look forward to doing every single year. These are incredible stories of people who have had amazing recoveries. Thanks to this amazing facility, they are able to get clean and lead a more productive life. The date of our annual radiothon is going to be Monday, November 20th. Listen in and please donate. You can get more information at 99.7 WTN, including a link to the website for Nashville's Rescue Mission.
It's 39 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. I'm Brian Wilson, and you're listening to The Drive on this chilly evening. It's it's like 40, 39, 40 degrees outside. And tomorrow night, all the little ghoulies and goblins and ghosties will all be wearing coats. So what could you give them to warm them up? I mean, you can't give them drink, like hot cider or something like that. That wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, that's not advised.
Not advised. I don't know.
I mean, you could, and it would be nice, but people would freak out about that.
If you were really, you'd those little hand warmer packets, that you
There
get.
you go.
Yeah, just give them here. Happy Halloween.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's nice.
You'd probably
the
get
kids, the parents chaperoning would appreciate that. But the kids would be like, "What is this? Where's my candy?"
Listen, I want to tell you, I was wrapped and ready at 10:30 Saturday night. By the way, went downtown Saturday night to have dinner.
All right.
I know. I came to town, and
they still let you in.
Yeah, went to Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse.
Ooh.
Have you been to that place?
I have not been, but I really want to go.
I'm telling you, it was really good.
It's like old school, right?
I tell you what, Mac Maury and Chris, we try to do, we do a Christmas party, but I would like to take you and your significant others out for a meal at Jimmy Kelly's.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you,
man.
I like a good blackened steak with Cajun seasonings, and it's hard to find. Most places look at you and say, would you blacken that steak? And they look at you like, what? You want me to cook it till it's black? No. I blacken spices. I want. Oh, it was so good. I mean, it just literally melted in my mouth. So, really excellent meal. I'll be going back there. I'll promise you that. And I met the current owner. And he gave us his book. It's written about the history of restaurants and all kinds of stuff in Nashville. I'm learning a lot.
Oh, that's cool.
That I didn't know about. Yeah. Anyway, and then so that was good. But then you rush right home because as soon as dinner was over, I wanted to be sitting in front of the TV at 10:30 to watch Nate Bargatze. That's the correct way to say it, Bargatze.
Apparently, he's been saying it
as
wrong
he
all his
hosted
life.
Saturday Night Live. It was so good. I mean, it was so good. His monologue crushed it. I had no doubt that he would. He'd be. He's just Old Hickory's own Nate Bargatze. We're so proud of him here in Tennessee, and he's done so well for himself. And this is like one of the peaks of a person's career.
Absolutely.
To be able to host Saturday Night Live. I mean, my goodness, not everybody gets asked to do it. So he just goes out and crushes the monologue. But he was in virtually every sketch. During the whole night. I mean, there wasn't hardly a moment where he wasn't a part of what was on the screen, except when the Foo Fighters were playing, and that was great in its own right. And so I could have gone for the monologue, but there was a sketch in which he portrays General Washington at Valley Forge in 1777. And because the folks at Saturday Night Live don't mind us doing this, we're going to play the entire sketch as Nate Bargatze enters a camp around a campfire where some of the soldiers have gathered and they're discussing things and takes on the conversation about the America that he wants to build. It includes, well, I'll just let it play out for itself. Here you go.
It's true. Yeah. Liberty.
And he just walks off. Oh, I thought that was so good. I thought and the fact that he had such a a presence in the show made me wonder, that Lorne Michaels obviously saw something in him that knew he could do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he did Second City in Chicago for a while, so his improv skills must be pretty good. You don't get to be a part of Second City without doing that. Yeah. But I thought it was a home run for Nate Bargatze, and I thoroughly enjoyed every minute that he was on the screen. I mean, he's such a nice guy. Mm-hmm. He's such a good guy, and his humor is, so family friendly. I'm excited when somebody like that really finds success, because in the world of comedy, that's a rare thing, it seems. And I've watched his arc. It's just going. He's hitting the stratosphere right now, and I only hope but more good things for Nate Bargatze as he goes forward. And his family still lives here. He still lives here actually too. I think he lives over in Williamson County now, but he's from Old Hickory. He talked about the Wilson County Fair during his monologue.
Yes, he did.
Which was hilarious.
Pretty cool.
Apparently, it's changed a bit since those times.
I would imagine.
I don't think they have the donkey jumping off the diving board anymore.
Donkey, jump, and he used the word jump, maybe not the right word. The donkey fell off the diving board might be more accurate. And he went on to say that, the folks at PETA stopped that. And that was one we sort of all got, you know?
Yeah, well, that's understandable.
Yeah. Anyway, great news. A bit of sad news over the weekend. I was so saddened to hear, as I think most Americans were who adored the show Friends, of the death of Matthew Perry. Now, he was 54. He was found unresponsive in his hot tub and had been out playing. Again, it's this pickleball thing that'll get you. He was playing pickleball that morning and then came back and sent his aide, he had an aide, to run some errands. He climbed in the hot tub, and when the aide came back a couple hours later, having run the errands, he was found in the tub unresponsive. And 54 years old. I mean, I think of all the characters on Friends, he was my favorite. I honestly, Jennifer Aniston, that just goes without saying, but I mean, you know, of the guys, it was Matthew Perry.
Yeah, he was good.
My favorite line is one day somebody said something outrageous, and his response was, "Can't open, worms everywhere." And I still use that line because I think it's just so good, and it's so classically Chandler Bing. But I don't think there was much difference between Chandler Bing and Matthew Perry.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
I think people the writers of the show just figured out this guy's got something. We'll just write to his voice, and I think that's exactly. I think when you saw Chandler Bing, you were seeing Matthew Perry. Okay. Well, anyway, sad loss there. Good news for Nate, bad news for Matthew Perry and fans of the show Friends. 50 minutes now past the hour of 5 o'clock. Hey, Dr. Kevin Mitchell is my doctor, and he can be your doctor over at the Wellness Institute of Nashville, and he is there to help you with your pain. I mean, do you have pain in your back and your neck, your arms, your legs? Have a tingling or a numbness or a weakness? Have you been heard the phrases bulging disc or disc herniation or spinal stenosis? All of these things can potentially be made better through the application of a therapy known as non-surgical spinal decompression. And Dr. Mitchell is a national leader in that particular area of therapy. He knows an awful lot about it. And I can tell you from personal experience, it can help you. I had problems with my neck and my lower back. And I went through the therapy. I did the work and went to see him on a regular basis. And I no longer have those issues. It really made a big difference in my life. So if you're in pain, why not take advantage of their new patient offer? You can get your first exam, consultation, x-rays. You can bring in your own MRIs or x-rays if you have them. And you get your first treatment, all of that, just $23. And then you'll be able to get half off spinal decompression or half off of the KT machine. That's a knee machine. It's sort of like spinal decompression, but it's a machine designed to work on your knee. It gently elongates the knee so you can get the healing therapy down deep. So if this sounds like something you need to investigate, just call this number and set up an appointment. 615-246-5009. 615-246-5009. Learn more at painisbad.com.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. When we get to retirement, what do we want to do? We want to go and kick back, right? But we also want to take an income from our investment portfolios. And there are a lot of common myths that I hear about how do you take an income from an investment portfolio. One is that people will get into, this was really big a few years ago, really big, real estate investment trust. Now, real estate gets rented and it kicks off an income, and then you have some kind of dividend that's paid, and because the REIT has to pay out most of the dividend, it's a great way to take income in retirement. But what happens, like what happened recently, when all of a sudden the properties go unrented? What happens to your income? Bye-bye, it's gone. Another thing that I see is this: people buy stocks or stock mutual funds that are dividend paying, and what we'll do is we'll live off the dividends. Well, what is the dividend? It's part of the earnings of the company. So you got the earnings of the company, right? And then what happens is the company may pay out some of the dividend, and they call that a dividend when they pay it out, or they may retain some of it, and it's called retained earnings. Well, the problem is this: What if the company's earnings go down? Just like the real estate investment trust up here, what if the earnings go down? What happens to your dividend? It goes away. All of a sudden, it's bye-bye to your retirement income. So what do we want to do? We want to diversify way better. If you look at the academic research on investing and how to take income from a portfolio, quite often what it is saying, okay, I'm going to have some money in various asset classes. Large companies, small companies, value companies, growth companies, international companies, short-term bonds and intermediate bonds and so on and so forth. And what I do is I look at these different areas of the market and they have a historic return. And what happens if the portfolio does this area of the market does better than this one? Well, in that particular year, I'm going to take income from this part of the portfolio. Then the next year, maybe this area does better than everything else. I'll take income from there. So what I'm doing is diversifying, which is an age-old concept. I mean, good grief, Nobel Prize winning concept of investing. And I actually apply it to taking income from a portfolio. So why is it that we often see this kind of stuff? It's because of the fees and the commissions and all of the incentives to sell you things that maybe aren't in your best interest. And a lot of advisors, you look at it, they aren't held to a fiduciary standard. In other words, they don't have to keep your best interest first. Paul Winkler Inc., we hold ourselves voluntarily to that standard, and we actually disclose it in our disclosure brochures. So if you want to know more about what we do and learn more and educate along the way, go to paulwinkler.com. Set up a free 15-minute phone call so that you can learn more, become an educated investor. First step is easy. paulwinkler.com, free 15-minute phone call, and get started ASAP because you can't afford to wait. You've got to make sure you get this right. You don't get a second shot.
Let me tell you about USS United Structural Systems, a company that can help you with some of your biggest concerns might be waterproofing or foundation repair. If you have those problems, there's really just one company to call. They have over 25,000 satisfied residential customers. Now, here's how it works. They will come out to your house. They will assess your situation. They're not out to sell you something you don't need. They're just kind of here to fix your problem. They'll give you their best advice. And by the way, they really know this stuff. This is what they do. They're real experts at it. And so they give you your advice, and if you decide to go forward, you don't pay a penny until the job is done and you're completely satisfied. And according to some of the reviews that I have gotten, a lot of people are really satisfied with this company. Here is a customer from Nashville named Joshua. Recently had our foundation repaired by the team at USS. It was an exceptional experience. They finished ahead of schedule. Who does that? They kept us informed every step of the way. They restored everything perfectly, even after digging deep into our lawn and tearing out concrete. Their professionalism and courtesy stood out, working seamlessly around other vendors at our house, and explained all the changes that came up front. They got multiple quotes, he said, and USS was not only competitive but honest, without the unnecessary add-ons we saw from others. Highly recommend USS. Well, I think you got the picture now, right? Give them a call. At USS, they guarantee their best, serving Middle Tennessee, Southern Kentucky, Western Kentucky, Northern Alabama, online at USSTN.com. Here's the number, 615-488-7855.
6:02, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories right now. 43 degrees and a freeze warning going into effect tonight starting at 3 a.m. Latest forecast and traffic report on the way in 5 minutes. Breaking news from Channel 4. Mount Juliet police were in pursuit of suspects that they believe to have stolen law enforcement rifles and body armor. They have now ended that active pursuit as they believe that the suspect car evaded officers in the Antioch area off of Hobson Pike, and now Metro Nashville police have been alerted, and still no active pursuit there. We'll keep you updated here. Biden administration focusing on anti-Semitism in education today. Karen Travers with details.
Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona, and other officials today will discuss efforts the Biden administration is taking to counter what the White House calls an alarming uptick in reported instances of anti-Semitism at schools and on college campuses. They'll meet at the Education Department with the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. National Security Spokesman John Kirby on ABC's Good Morning America.
It's a deep concern, which is why we as an administration are working so closely with state and local authorities to make sure we can identify any threats and disrupt them before they happen.
And the IDF continuing that expanded ground operation into Gaza, making it closer to Gaza City up in the north. And staying in the nation's capital, President Biden signed an executive order today that he says will make the development of artificial intelligence safer for Americans. And in a speech at the White House, Mr. Biden said his executive order invokes the Defense Production Act, which was used during the pandemic. The president said this time he's using the law to require companies to explain how they're using AI.
That means companies must tell the government about the large-scale AI systems they're developing and share rigorous independent test results to prove they pose no national security or safety risk to the American people.
President Biden said that AI must be governed. Crime right now in Tennessee. News 2 says that a man has been accused of intentionally setting a house on flames. 36-year-old Roman Winkler was arrested yesterday, the day after a home in Huntington caught fire. His bond has been set at $250,000. And fans mourning the weekend death of Friends star Matthew Perry. Alex Stone is in L.A. with new details on the investigation into his death.
LAPD sources are telling us today it was Matthew Perry's assistant who returned home to find him unresponsive in his hot tub. We've also learned from those close to him he had been playing pickleball that morning before he returned home. Pickleball had become a part of his life. The LA County Medical Examiner did an autopsy on Perry's body on Sunday but could not determine a cause of death. Investigators are now waiting on toxicology results to figure out why he died.
And that is the latest news, traffic, and weather next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
8 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. I'm Brian Wilson, and this is The Drive. This is the fourth hour. We've got one more hour before we hand it over to Mark Levin. He'll carry on late into the evening. And so we're so glad that you're with us here on the 30th day of October. It's sort of chilly. I mean, here in Bucolic, I don't know, is it Bucolic when it's cold? I don't know. Bucolic, Watertown. That's the place I live. 43 degrees right now.
Yeah, that's what I've got here downtown as well.
I just walked the dog over to the house during the commercial break, and it's cold. And it's going to get down to, here in Watertown, 29 degrees tonight. Whew. Yeah. I mean, that's flat chilly. So, this is the night where, honestly, I don't mind people talking about, I always have sort of this thing. I don't think that weather is the lead most days. I mean, clearly, if you got severe weather, it's the lead, all right? If you got temperatures at 106 and everybody's struggling, it's the lead. And on days when you get your first freeze, I think it's the lead because, we need to understand that, well, it's going to get cold and we have to do certain things like protect our tender plants and protect our animals. And so it's, I always want to say, it's going to get cold tonight, and it's going to get cold tomorrow night, and it's going to be about 40 degrees about this time tomorrow when the trick-or-treaters start coming by. Because, it gets dark early. So there you have it. I've gotten that out of the way. This is a public service announcement from your friends here at The Drive. Another public service announcement, and boy, this thing in Mount Juliet sounds like a mess. Armed suspects on the run accused of stealing law enforcement weapons in Mount Juliet. They're apparently accused of stealing rifles and body armor. Not a good combination. And they were in the middle of a pursuit, but the pursuit ended when they got to the Nashville line, Davidson County line, and they had to pull off of it. And Davidson County was told to take it up. One wonders, they've got this helicopter. Let me tell you something, folks. Used to be an old saying in police circles that you may outrun my Chevrolet, but you'll never outrun my two-way. Well, you're not going to outrun this helicopter either. When I was watching them play back the tape of them chasing John Drake Jr. across town before he committed suicide, it was amazing. I mean, they were on this guy. And they had been for a long, long time by helicopter. And I mean, they had cameras and it was dark. And so they had the heat-seeking cameras there. They followed him every step of the way and were able to give the ground units the exact location in real time. And so I'm hoping that the helicopter got up in time to take on this particular case. And we'll try to find out more. I mean, when you say they got law enforcement weapons and body armor, I have questions. I mean, I think we need a little more information there. How did that happen? How did that occur? And I hope that we will get that information over time, and we'll see. As long as we're talking about Nashville drivers now can complain and that they live in a city that has the worst commute in the whole United States. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't agree with this assessment. You say, what do you know, Wilson? You never, the farthest you go is about 50 yards out to your garage every day. Well, that's not true. I drove into Nashville a lot in the very first days of my time at Super Talk. And I used to make the drive in every day from Mount Juliet, every day. And even though I did it at 3 o'clock in the morning and the numbers weren't bad, I've done my share of commuting, and I know what it was in D.C., and I can tell you right now, D.C. is a lot worse than Nashville. But one way or the other, there's been a survey done, and they have decided in their infinite wisdom that Nashville is the worst in the country. From WKRN, the woes of traffic congestion are all too familiar for Nashvillians who spend hours on the road just trying to make it to and from work. But is the commute really that much worse than other cities? A recent study conducted by Forbes Home analyzed the top 25 U.S. cities with the worst commutes and determined the commute for most Nashvillians is the worst in the country. And I'm not downplaying if you got a bad commute. I'm not trying to tell you that you don't. I'm just telling you that when you look at the sort of the parameters of what they considered when deciding if you had a bad commute or not, I don't think it was the right parameters. Researchers gathered several metrics from the 2021 U.S. Census as well as walkscore.com to determine which cities have the hardest commutes. Those metrics included things like the average time spent commuting to work, access to public transit, walkability, and the percentage of workers in each household without a car. In Nashville, residents have an average commute time of 28.6 minutes. I think that's probably about right.
Pretty good.
That sounds pretty good. I mean, I think that's about right, and that's not a horrible commute. For example, other cities in the top 10, like Charlotte, North Carolina, Dallas, Texas, and boy, traffic is a mess there, and even Los Angeles, California, the average commute is 32.3 minutes. So there are a lot of cities that have longer commutes. But they brought in a whole bunch of different metrics here. In New York City, the average commute time is 43 minutes. And in Washington, D.C., the aforementioned Washington, D.C., it can take residents up to 37 minutes to get to work. If I got to work in 37 minutes when I lived in D.C., it would have been a good day. It was 45 minutes to an hour every day. And that's one way, and then you had to do it going backwards, going back home. However, and this is where the numbers get sort of squirrely, if you ask me, the walkability and access to public transport is much higher in those areas. Nashville has a walk score of 28.8 and a transit score of 21.7, a bike score of 29.7, all out of 100. But in other places, the walk scores are better, all right? And that's why we went up the list as the worst. It's these other things. Okay. Transit score. Okay, I see a lot of transit around town when I'm driving. I see the buses. I don't see anybody in them. The walk score, I guess, if you live downtown. I used to walk to work when I lived downtown. It's a block.
Yeah, to be fair, that wasn't much of a commute.
Wasn't much of a walk, yeah. It was at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that's true.
With the scary homeless people out there. Even places like Dallas have a better walk score and a better transit score. So because Nashville has, we don't have rail in and out. Well, we do. We do have some rail. I don't want to say that. We have rail. But we don't have rail from the south, as far as I can tell, and that's really what we need. So that makes it a little worse for the people down south on 60. I think the folks down south on 65, south of town, I think they have the worst of it. I mean, it's bad on I-40 when I go in during early morning commute.
24 is pretty bad, too, like for folks that are like in the Murfreesboro. That gets pretty bad coming up that way.
According to the study, the city, I'm sorry. Let's see. Yeah, in Nashville, the city has 452,194 workers, but only 2.6% of households do not have access to a car. That's, I think, pretty high for. So what makes Nashville bad in this particular study is the fact that people want to drive their cars to go to work. And I think that's the way it is in most places. Behind Nashville, some of the hardest other commutes that are listed were in Charlotte, North Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida, Houston, Texas, and Washington, D.C. Okay. So if you're out there driving around and you say, yeah, my commute really stinks. And now you can call up your friends and say, I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's the worst commute city in the entire country. Well, according to this study, you would be accurate, but I'm not really sure that it's true.
Yeah, I don't know.
Still, I mean, it's when When you're stuck in traffic, it doesn't make any difference, does it?
Oh, yeah. Everyone thinks they got the worst commute when they're stuck in traffic. Yeah. For sure.
Yep. On another upbeat note about local news, very happy to see this. The folks at GM and the UAW have reached a tentative deal that they're the last of the big three. Ford pretty much sewed it up first. Stellantis, the Chrysler-led Stellantis group, they agreed to it, and then the last one was the UAW was still trying to negotiate with GM, and they pulled strings, and they over the weekend they closed down the Spring Hill plant, and that's GM's biggie, one of their biggies, and so they were pretty upset about that, and it sort of forced them to just go ahead and bite the bullet. So all three of the big auto workers now have deals with the UAW, and the strike is effectively over. I think there's some I's that have to be dotted and T's that have to be crossed, but it looks like it's over. And the good folks down at Spring Hill didn't have to be on the picket line very long. And that I'm very happy for. So congratulations on that one. Glad that one is over, and then glad that you didn't have to spend a great deal of time out of work. And I'm glad you're not on the picket line tonight when it's cold.
Oh, yeah. Good timing on that one, huh?
Yeah, you figured it out just in time. And when we come back in a moment, a couple of things about the 2024 election that you may not have heard. I'll get to that right after this break. It's 20 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock. A question from the folks at Beacon Capital Management. How are you faring in this rough and tumble market? The experts at Beacon Capital Management understand it can be a little scary, but here's the thing. Beacon Capital Management has a plan to assess where you are and help you make any mid-course corrections that might be needed. Wouldn't it be great to have peace of mind that you're on the right path? Beacon can provide you that reassurance. It starts with a simple phone call to this number. Please write it down, and if you miss it the first time, get a pencil. I'll come back around and give it to you again. You call this number, 615-488-9303. Now, the experts at Beacon will take it from there. You have nothing to lose except for all the worry. Get started today by calling 615-488-9303. At the end of the process, you'll be able to rest easy knowing you have a plan that meets all your retirement goals. Replace the worry with confidence that you're on the right path. Again, that number, 615-488-9303. The experts at Beacon stand ready to take your stress away. Learn more at askbeaconnow.com. 25 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. I'm Brian Wilson, your friend and radio buddy, and this is The Drive. Looking at 2024 polling data, the disapproval rating for the current president of the United States, Joseph Biden, continues to skyrocket. It's way in the wrong direction if you want to get reelected, that is. President Biden's disapproval rating now sits at 56%. Almost 60%, according to a new poll released today. This is a News Nation Decision Desk HQ poll, found that 56% of respondents say they somewhat or strongly disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling his job. 44% say they are somewhat or strongly approve. Broken down by party, 85% of Democrats like the job he's doing, 40% of independents, and that's an important number, and 10% of Republicans approve of Biden's job as president. Broken down by age, respondents 18 to 34 years old gave Biden the highest marks, 48%, still underwater, but respondents aged 35 to 55 gave Biden a 45% approval rating. Those over 55 gave him a 42% approval rating. The highest demographic that gave Biden his highest approval numbers were African Americans, but compared with Hispanic and Asian voters, both gave Biden only a 55% approval rating. And so the numbers don't look real good there for this president. His disapproval rating, again, sitting at 56%. But don't worry. Kamala Harris says that they're going to win. There's just no doubt about it. We're going to win. She was on 60 Minutes this weekend. Well, what a cream puff piece this was. Oh, my gosh. Practically slobbered all over her. But she said, that before she got out of there, that we're going to win this thing.
Why are you not 30 points ahead?
Well, I'm not a political pundit, so I'm not going to speak to that. But what I will say is this. When the American people are able to take a close look at election time on their options, I think the choice is going to be clear. Bill, we're going to win. Let me just tell you that. We're going to win. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we will win.
You say that with such conviction.
I have no doubt, but I also have no doubt it's going to be a lot of work. And everyone's going to have to participate. This is a democracy.
Despite the criticism and low poll numbers, former prosecutor Kamala Harris told us she's prepared to trust the verdict of the American people. Do you have to ask yourself, why are people seeming not to hear our message?
I look at it more as, let's keep getting out there. And as with any election, we got to make our case to the American people. That's part of our responsibility. And that's this process. And that's what it is. And that's a fair process.
All right. There you have it. Saying that if she gets beaten, she will accept the outcome. Okay. And by the way, some out there, even though it seems like Democrats are getting a little nervous about these numbers by Joe Biden and how bad they look, and I still believe Joe Biden probably will not become the nominee, but, we're running out of time. It seems that now some of the party faithful are going around saying, stop looking for an alternative. President Joe Biden is just as low in the White House internal polls as any of the public ones. Whenever aides stress over the numbers in their weekly political meetings, Mike Donilon, for decades, Biden's top political advisor, is the consistent voice of the president's innermost circle. According to people who have heard him, Biden's numbers are pretty much where they were this far out from the 2022 midterms, and all of the doubts sounded the same, but the president's team pursued its own careful approach to the campaign, then saw Democrats exceed expectations. They remained confident that Biden is Democrats' best option for 2024. Ooh, I hope they hold on to that thought. I hope they do. Now, Democrats are telling CNN they partly have themselves to blame for Biden's soft support, that the months of airing out the what-if alternatives have been harmful to the Biden campaign. And in certain times globally on the economy, when you see the former president with all the crises, with a House that's so dysfunctional, I think people naturally have a bit of nervousness. I think they're very nervous. But, you keep on there, Joe Biden. You keep on, plugging along. I think as things move forward, I just hope that you don't change your policy. Just stick it in. Just keep going. It'll be fine. Really, honestly. It's 30 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock. Let me tell you about folks over at Grace Point Healthcare, where they deliver medicine affordably with menu-style transparent pricing. The idea here is you'll know how much it costs before the care is delivered. Now, if you've been watching TV, if you've been looking at your own healthcare plan, as many people do this time of year, I mean, it's when you have to make these major decisions. You might want to think about a smart care plan. It might work out really good for you. Smart care plans start at $69 a month. And for that, you get unlimited office visits and free basic labs for the entire year. And because they treat the whole family, even newborns, they can offer family plans as well. Now, if you marry this with a high deductible insurance plan, the ones that are not quite as expensive, this could end up saving you and your family hundreds of dollars. At Grace Point, they take their time with each patient. They see you the same or next day. There is no long wait times. There are no long wait times or crowded wait rooms. They treat naturally whenever possible. It is a military vet practice. Just some of the reasons why it's been voted the best primary care provider by Toasted Music City year after year after year after year. Grace Point Healthcare is on Main Street in Franklin. Here's the number, 599-6868. That's 599-6868 to schedule a visit.
Hey everybody, Dan Mattis with Nashville's Morning News on WTN. I'm here at the Nashville Rescue Mission doing the interviews that I look forward to doing every single year. These are incredible stories of people who have had amazing recoveries. Thanks to this amazing facility, they are able to get clean and lead a more productive life. The date of our annual radiothon is going to be Monday, November 20th. Listen in and please donate. You can get more information at 99.7 WTN, including a link to the website for Nashville's Rescue Mission.
It's 38 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in the chair, and glad that you're with us. I'll be with you for about 22 more minutes before we hand it over to Mark Levin, the great one, and he will carry on through the evening. I want to bring you some news and information. I'm reading, I got this story. Let me pull this up. Reading this story about this guy that they're looking for. That apparently the folks at Mount Juliet were in pursuit at some point. And I don't want to cast any aspersions. As I read the story, there's more detail. Let me tell you what we know. This is from WKRN, and it's the dateline is Mount Juliet, but this didn't start in Mount Juliet apparently. A police chase involving suspects accused of stealing rifles and body armor from an unknown law enforcement agency took place in Mount Juliet Monday evening. It started about 5:23, so about an hour ago, a little more than an hour ago. Officers were pursuing heavily armed suspects. And the Mount Juliet said that Guardian Shield, that's their license plate recognition system there, and they've got, I think, every major intersection now in Mount Juliet is covered by this Guardian Shield, alerted officers to the stolen car, which is also a suspect vehicle in the weapons theft from another Middle Tennessee community as yet unnamed. According to authorities, they tried to stop the car in the Providence Marketplace, but the car fled and led officers on a chase down South Mount Juliet Road to the Antioch area. A witness told News 2 they were nearly hit by the getaway car on Mount Juliet Road in front of Providence. At 5:38, the Mount Juliet Police Department said the suspect had evaded officers in the Antioch area off Hobson Pike, and they were no longer in active pursuit. And according to officials, an attempt to stop the car using spike strips was unsuccessful because the vehicle went off the road to avoid the spikes. Once officers lost sight of the car in the Hamilton Church Road area, Mount Juliet Police said they notified Metro Nashville Police since the vehicle was now in its jurisdiction. News 2 reached out to Metro Police and other law enforcement agencies for more information, but no additional details have been confirmed. Sound like some bad people, and I want you to know that Mount Juliet Police, as is often the case, I mean, these license plate readers are quite effective. I mean, if you're going through Mount Juliet and you've done a crime and it's been put into the computer system, you're probably going to have an encounter with law enforcement. They take it very seriously, and that system has worked very well for a very long time. And so a lot of people wander into Mount Juliet not knowing about it, and they find out, oops, every time you pass under a traffic light, if you've got an active warrant out for your arrest, and they entered it into the computer with a license plate number or a name, chances are it's going to trigger a warning to police, and they're going to be on your tail pretty quick. But it didn't start in Mount Juliet. It started in another Middle Tennessee community when the weapons and the body armor were stolen, and then it was only the Mount Juliet that happened to pick up on it down near the Providence area, and the chase was on. So again, let's hope that police have some success in tracking this individual down. Sounds like they're on the track of getting the right answers here. We have talked a lot on this program about electric vehicles and how it seems to me that America is not ready for electric vehicles, and yet the Biden administration keeps trying to push these things down our throat and tell us that, we're all going to be driving electric cars, and I'm not ready for an electric car. And I don't think a lot of people within the sound of my voice are ready for an electric car. And it's only recently that the manufacturers of cars in this country, the big three automakers, have started to say, you know what? This is not working out the way we thought it was going to work out. We thought that we could have everybody make a transition in the next, 5 to 10 years. Everybody would be driving an electric car. Now, as they have a lot of electric cars that have cost them a lot of money to develop, the car makers are saying, you know what? We can't sell the darn things. Nobody wants them. And so the dealers are saying, no, we don't want any of your electric cars. Started with Ford first noticed that after initially being in big demand, the Ford E-Mustang, I don't know, it's not really a Mustang, but it's
Mach-E.
Yeah,
that's what
Mach-E, that's it. Yeah, that's what they call it. They can't sell them. They're stacking up, and now dealers are telling Ford, don't send us any more because we can't sell the ones we have. Interesting. I mean, those cars are fast as Greek lightning, but they're not really, they're not selling now. The initial early adopters grabbed one, and then that was enough. Nobody else seems to be interested. Word of mouth got around, whatever. Now, former Ford CEO Mark Fields warns that the auto industry should not expect America to quickly adopt electric vehicles. He appeared on CNBC following Ford striking a deal with United Auto Workers the day before. And while some of Ford workers have been on strike for over a month, they all returned to work this week. According to Fields, the industry will have to lower its expectations surrounding the popularity of EVs because America has a symbiotic relationship with the internal combustion engine. Yes, we do. I got a lot of internal combustion engines here at Stately Wilson Manor. The auto industry is all about getting scale economies and pennies count. The ICE business really funds the EV business. You got to keep that golden goose to keep producing them. According to former CEO, a better way to transition the public to EVs will be via, and I think this is right, hybrid cars. While the shift may take longer than some in the industry are asking for, it would be the most effective way. I heard this weekend an ad on TV while I was watching some football talking about a hybrid car that would go 600 miles on a tank of gas. And you never plug it in because basically the gasoline powers a very small motor, a small engine that in turn creates the electricity by turning a generator, and that powers the wheels. So the wheels are all electric, but the electricity for the wheels doesn't come from a charging battery. It comes from gasoline turning that little generator, making it spin, and that's sort of the same idea that had been. I didn't know this until recently. That's all diesel locomotives. The diesel powers a generator. The wheels and the power on a train is electric, and it's the same idea. That's the whole hybrid concept. So it's been in trains forever, and now they're putting it in cars, and they're very efficient. They sip gas very, very lightly. They get you down the highway. I don't know that I'm going to get a hybrid car, but if my choice was that or an electric, I'd definitely go hybrid. And so a lot of people are saying hybrids are the bridge. And now they're rethinking whether or not they can sell these all-electric cars. And if you have EVs, you don't have to worry about charging. You still have to fill it up, but, you get 43, 44 miles to the gallon. That's a lot of miles. All right. By the way, oil is still, it came down a little bit. And I don't know why, but I think it will be going back up. The World Bank reported on Monday that oil prices could be pushed into uncharted waters if the violence between Israel and Hamas widens, which could result in increased food prices worldwide. The World Bank's commodity markets outlook found that while the effects of oil prices should be limited if the conflict doesn't expand, the outlook would darken quickly if the conflicts were to widen or escalate. The attack on Israel by the organization Hamas and the ensuing Israeli military operation have raised fear of a wider Middle East conflict. So far, that has not emerged, but, it seems like we're really in uncharted territory in that regard. This World Bank report simulates 3 scenarios for the global oil supply in the event of a small, medium, or large disruption. Effects should be limited if the conflict doesn't widen. In a small disruption, that's what we're probably headed for now, oil prices be about $90 a barrel. In a medium disruption, equivalent to the disruptions experienced during the Iraq War, oil supplies would diminish by 3 million to 5 million barrels a day, driving prices up by another 35%. In a large disruption scenario, comparable to the Arab oil embargo of 1973, the oil supply would shrink by 6 to 8 million barrels per day, and prices could go up 56 to 75%, or about $140 to $157 a barrel for oil. We're right now just below the $90 a barrel mark. So, wow, that would be bad. Let's hope that it doesn't escalate. As long as we're talking about, I don't know how to make this transition. This one's one we need to sort of squish together, I guess, because it doesn't really go well with the other one. McDonald's. Thank you. The McDonald's chicken sandwich has become a $1 billion brand worldwide for the McDonald's Corporation. But not initially. Their chicken sandwich was doing okay, but it wasn't setting the world on fire until they renamed it. Isn't this something? You think marketing doesn't matter, but when they renamed their chicken sandwich the McCrispy, it just took off. McDonald's revealed in an earnings call Monday that its rebranded crispy chicken sandwiches, now known as the McDonald's McCrispy, have grown to become a $1 billion global brand. The development comes as McDonald's says it consolidated revenues increased by 14% and comparable sales rose 8.1%. Our McCrispy chicken sandwich continues to be an important driver of chicken share growth. Having first launched in markets like Canada and Germany, now a billion-dollar brand worldwide. McDonald's describes the McCrispy sandwich as a Southern-style fried chicken that's crispy, juicy, and tender perfection, topped off with the crinkle-cut pickles and served on a toasted butter potato roll. I have not had one.
They have copied Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Brian, I've never had one of those either, so we have not contributed to that billion-dollar success.
Well, now I'm going to have to try one. That's all there is to it.
I'll still go to Chick-fil-A for mine.
Okay. And as long as we're talking about food news, very quickly, Krispy Kreme stock is down because, as Bloomberg reports, there are all these weight loss drugs out there like Ozempic and Wegovy.
People
and they're
aren't hungry
saying
anymore.
people aren't hungry for donuts anymore. And they're afraid that people will not be buying. Are they crazy? Of course. If you're going to have one thing, it'll be a Krispy Kreme donut. 50 minutes past the hour. Let me tell you about the Wellness Institute of Nashville. Dr. Kevin Mitchell is my doctor. He can be your doctor as well. And he's bringing back this half-off spinal decompression treatment and half-off the KT knee machine. That's right. You've still got a few more days where you can take advantage of this thing. Do you have tingling, numbness, weakness in the back pain? Do you have disc bulging, disc herniation, spinal stenosis? All of these things can be made better through the therapy known as non-surgical spinal decompression. I've been through it. I had problems with my neck and my back, and Dr. Mitchell put me in good order. By the way, Dr. Mitchell is a national leader when it comes to spinal decompression. So it starts with a phone call, 615-246-5009. Now, they have this thing called the KT knee machine, sort of like spinal decompression, but it's aimed at the knee. It gently elongates your knee and then allows the healing therapy to get deep down inside so it can do some good. Listen, again, 615-246-5009. That's 615-246-5009. Learn more at painisbad.com.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. When we get to retirement, what do we want to do? We want to go and kick back, right? But we also want to take an income from our investment portfolios. And there are a lot of common myths that I hear about how do you take an income from an investment portfolio. One is that people will get into, this was really big a few years ago, really big, real estate investment trust. Now, real estate gets rented and it kicks off an income, and then you have some kind of dividend that's paid, and because the REIT has to pay out most of the dividend, it's a great way to take income in retirement. But what happens, like what happened recently, when all of a sudden the properties go unrented? What happens to your income? Bye-bye, it's gone. Another thing that I see is this: people buy stocks or stock mutual funds that are dividend paying, and what we'll do is we'll live off the dividends. Well, what is the dividend? It's part of the earnings of the company. So you got the earnings of the company, right? And then what happens is the company may pay out some of the dividend, and they call that a dividend when they pay it out, or they may retain some of it, and it's called retained earnings. Well, the problem is this: what if the company's earnings go down, just like the real estate investment trust up here? What if the earnings go down? What happens to your dividend? It goes away. All of a sudden, it's bye-bye to your retirement income. So what do we want to do? We want to diversify way better. If you look at the academic research on investing and how to take income from a portfolio, quite often what it is saying, okay, I'm going to have some money in various asset classes. Large companies, small companies, value companies, growth companies, international companies, short-term bonds and intermediate bonds, and so on and so forth. And what I do is I look at these different areas of the market. They have a historic return. And what happens if the portfolio does this area of the market does better than this one? Well, in that particular year, I'm going to take income from this part of the portfolio. Then the next year, maybe this area does better than everything else. I'll take income from there. So what I'm doing is diversifying, which is an age-old concept. I mean, good grief, Nobel Prize winning concept of investing. And I actually apply it to taking income from a portfolio. So why is it that we often see this kind of stuff? It's because of the fees and the commissions and all of the incentives to sell you things that maybe aren't in your best interest. And a lot of advisors, you look at it, they aren't held to a fiduciary standard. In other words, they don't have to keep your best interest first. Paul Winkler Inc., we hold ourselves voluntarily to that standard, and we actually disclose it in our disclosure brochures. So if you want to know more about what we do and learn more and educate along the way, go to paulwinkler.com. Set up a free 15-minute phone call so that you can learn more, become an educated investor. First step is easy. paulwinkler.com, free 15-minute phone call, and get started ASAP, because you can't afford to wait. You've got to make sure you get this right. You don't get a second shot.